Those of you who have run from the cops and didn't get caught, what's your story? A party got busted on spring break and I boogied out the back door when the cops were filing everyone else out the front. Hopped a fence and ran into a neighbor's security man who was quite out of shape. He asked if I was running from the cops as the blue lights flash behind us. I say, of course not. He asks for my ID and I promptly turn heels and run again. This is where it gets good. Drunk me decided I needed to run in zigzags to dodge any taser shots, and sure enough, I cut to my right and the taser line hits the ground next to me. Turned my head to see the fat guard's mouth opened and ran 2 miles back to my hotel room, safe and sound. Story 2. This one was a while back. I'm 32 now, so this had to have happened when I was like 13 or 14 maybe. Anyway, a bunch of my friends and I had gathered to play manhunt, essentially hide and seek with teams, except we went all out. We all wore all black, played at night, and definitely hid in places where we shouldn't. Neighbors' backyards, under their cars, etc. Anyhow, everything was going great this night. Everyone's having fun. I got made, scoped out, and had to ditch the current spot I was in, and started heading out towards an intersection in my neighborhood. Out of nowhere, I heard a speeding car. It slams on the brakes, and I hear a booming voice, "Get on the ground now." Oh, crap. I instantly turned heel and booked it back down the street that I'd come from. I hear footsteps gaining on me and got super nervous. But the cop must have seen someone else in closer proximity because he turns 90 degrees and starts chasing them. I'm still running for my damn life when I hear, "Yo, over here!" I turn to the right to see my best friend hiding under a van in someone's driveway, so I jumped under there with him. We hid there for about 2 more minutes, but more and more cop cars were showing up, and I hear my best friend say, "Man, screw this," and he takes off jumping fences/backyards of houses leading back to his place. I followed suit. Somehow we made it and he gave me a change of clothes, a white t-shirt and white hat, and told me I had to go because his parents were getting suspicious. Luckily, the game of manhunt had started at his house, so my bike was there. I definitely rode my bike home the long way. On my way home, I saw cops looking through bushes and yards with canine units and flashlights. But because I was wearing essentially all white and on a bike, I guess I didn't fit the description of the guys they were looking for. They even brought a chopper out in the search. Funny part is, everyone that got caught and rounded up were sat on the curb literally across the street from my house. So I saw my friends in handcuffs as I rode by. I was terrified they would rat me out for some reason, but they didn't. My parents still give me crap for that one. They, naturally, were worried I would end up as one of the ones in handcuffs. Edit. The reason the cops went all out like that was because somebody had reported that they had heard someone on their roof and thought they were attempting to break in. We weren't about that life. We just went really hard when it came to manhunt. Pretty sure that's the last time we played it. Yeah, I can see how the night ending with most of your friends in handcuffs would deter you from playing it again. That being said, a chopper? That seems a bit overdramatic, don't you think? Like from other stories I've read, I don't think a break-in would ever get that kind of response. Where do you guys live? Story 4. I played something when I was young. It was essentially hide and seek with a twist. We would antagonize a friend's older brother until he would try to beat us up. Then we proceeded to hide around the neighborhood. I was hiding in some old lady's tree, and the brother was right below me. He's screaming stuff, and the woman comes out of her house to see what's going on. He was so scared trying to explain what was happening, and I decided this was my chance, so I dropped it down behind him and ran off. All I hear before he takes off behind me was this lady screaming that she was calling the cops. Story 5 was trespassing in the park after dark with some friends. 2 police officers showed up and flashed their lights, so we ran around a baseball field to get away. We noticed they were following us, so we all hid under those orange construction barrels you see along the highway. Minutes felt like hours to a young teenager running from the long arm of the law. Story 6. I spent 21 days in jail for trespassing in a cemetery at 16 years old. We were playing manhunt, basically tag mixed with hide and go seek. One person starts at the safe zone and they're it. They wait 5 minutes and go searching. Everyone else runs and hides. If you get back to the safe zone without being tagged, you win. Get caught and you're now on the it team. 2 of us were 16, went to jail. Other 2 were 15, got taken home to their parents. I got 40 hours of community service and time served. No drugs or alcohol were involved. Story 7. House party in high school. About 30 to 40 kids in a basement drinking, smoking. Suddenly, cops walk down the stairs. Someone just let them in. Tell us to sit tight and nobody to go anywhere. Cops walk back upstairs and we're all wasted. I finagle a window open and help my friends and a couple of brave souls up and out. I get out, run for a fence my friends just hopped, and cop grabs me, hauls me back into the house. Neglect to put me back in the basement. It's my friend's house, so I pretend I belong. Open the fridge, grab a Mountain Dew. Cop walks in with a bag of 100 breathalyzer tubes. I meander to the living room by the front door. Wait for the clear, casually walk out the front door. Make it 3 steps and spotlight hits me. Cop yells at me. I meander back in just by the front door. Spotlight turns off, I wait 5 seconds, and bolt out the front door again. Leap off front porch, sprint through front yards for 4 blocks until I'm in a field. Lay flat and call friends. Cops patrol by with spotlights but can't see me, so they go back to the house. Friends pick me up. I have a lot of these. We were really good at almost getting caught for stupid crap. This was early 2000s in a suburb in the United States. They took underage drinking very seriously. If caught, you got a minor in possession ticket. Fine and court fees were $300 to $500. So 30 plus tickets that night would net the county quite a bit of cash. We had a lot of kids showing up in hospitals with alcohol poisoning around that time too, so they were trying to help. Maybe. Story 8. I'd just gotten off the highway driving 70, and I was on this frontage road and was still in the fast driving mode. A cop goes by in the opposite direction and I immediately look at my speed and see I'm doing 65 and a 45. I wasn't speeding on purpose, just in a kind of cruise. I see him slow down. My destination wasn't far away, so I put the hammer down, just in time to see him pull a U-turn. I got up to about 90 before I had to pull into the place I was going. They had the garage door open already and I pulled in, jumped out, and slammed the door down. My friends were giving me the care to explain face, just in time for the cop to fly past at about 90 with the lights on. I waited about 6 hours before I went home. Look, OP, I don't know what you want us to think here. That was really stupid of you, man. Oh no, I drove past a cop and I was speeding. What do I do? Speed up, obviously. What are you thinking? Story 9. Ended up going to a massive kegger, 500 plus people in the middle of nowhere, Iowa. Shortly after we arrived, about 10 or so sheriffs showed up and began getting plate numbers and handing out public intoxication tickets and minor in possessions. I hopped in my trusty little 93 Geostorm and waited for the sheriff by the field entrance to get a little ways away from his vehicle before slapping it into first and dumping the clutch. Made it about half a mile from my friend's house before I looked up and spotted cherries in my rearview mirror. At this point, I figured there was no point in running, so I conceded and pulled over. Turns out that particular sheriff was in on a different call. Biggest sigh of relief ever. Story 10. I was riding a motorcycle without a license. There was a checkpoint in front of me and the cops waved me to the side of the road. I took a U-turn over the median and gunned it. Didn't look back and was scared of them showing up at my house for a week, but they never did. Story 11. I was 17 and driving a friend's truck without a license and past curfew. I saw a roadblock ahead, so I went down a different street. Switched with the owner of the truck and got pulled over by a sheriff. He questioned all 3 of us individually, briefly searched the truck and felt the temp of one of the bottles of beer. Yeah, we had been drinking, but thankfully let us go. I was so scared. If that had been a regular city cop and not a cool sheriff, I'm positive at least one of us would have been arrested. I don't know if this is a hot take, but I feel like you should have been at least reprimanded. Like, bro, you were driving without a license and while drinking? You're a moron, with all due respect, which is little. Story 12. I was in high school and was somewhat racing someone. The cop did a U-turn. I was going like over 100. I pulled a too fast, too furious, screeching turn down a side road and tried to haul it down the road. Saw the cop rip around the turn, so I figured the jig is up and not worth a high-speed chase. He made me sit in his car while he wrote the ticket. He gave me a 95 and 55 ticket, but while he was writing the ticket, I asked if I could get off with a warning. He said, "Nope, not after you tried to get away like that." So I think I got a reckless driving charge too and had to take 8 hours of a class. Story 13. I didn't necessarily run away, but when I was about 16 or 17 years old, I was walking home one night after a party with some friends, and the cops pulled up alongside us. They got out and immediately started searching us, and asking what we were doing out so late. Everyone had weed on them, but ditched it as soon as they pulled, except me. I had mine in a stash-like pocket in my hoodie. It would have been too obvious to dig it out and dump it, so I played it cool and left it. When the cop searched me, he did kind of a half-hearted pat-down. We hadn't really done anything wrong, and our IDs showed we lived in the area, so they got back in their cars and drove off. Everyone was kind of bummed about ditching their weed, so I didn't say anything until we got back to my buddy's house. When we walked through the door, I just pulled it out and held it up in the air. Everyone was stoked, and I was pretty chuffed with myself. Then we all got high. The end. Story 14. I was speeding down the interstate, like 90 and a 65. Saw the cop pull out as I passed. Luckily, there was a rest area half a mile ahead, so I floor it to the rest area and pull in. Quickly get out of my car and walk in. They can't pull you over if you aren't in the vehicle, and he doesn't know what I look like, so I'll wait inside. I see the cop pull in, and he's waiting behind a truck. Well, it was about an hour before their shift change, so I figured, screw it, I'll wait this guy out. Half an hour later, he leaves. I give it another half hour to be safe. Then I left. Never got pulled over. Story 15. I had been driving for over an hour, mostly on a turnpike with only one rest stop, and I was almost to the pub where I was meeting a friend. I had to pee and I was slightly speeding. Cop pulled me over for going maybe 7 or 8 miles over the speed limit. When I walked up, I was gripping the steering wheel and bouncing my feet. I said, "Sir, I'm so sorry. I really have to pee and I'm going to my local pub right there." He laughed and promised to make it quick, gave me a warning and followed me to the pub to make sure I wasn't lying or speeding again. I made it to the restroom just in time. Story 16. I was 17 and drinking a beer at a bar known for serving minors. There were 4 of us near the entrance. Cop enters and grabs the 2 closest by the arms. I turn around and calmly head for the back door. Once I hit the back door, I ran as fast as I could for about 15 seconds, then dove down and laid as flat as I could and put my head down. The bar was on the back edge of town, and behind it was a field with really tall bushes and foliage. The cop came back, flashed his light around, and he kept on repeating, "I see you, get up." I was hoping he was bluffing, so I stayed down, and luckily, I was right. I did feel pretty dumb, though, after finding out the other kids who got caught were told to go home with nothing more than that. Yeah, I feel like the cops got bigger issues with the bar for serving minors, not the minors they were serving. That's like really illegal as far as I know. Story 17. I was 19 at the time and sitting on the couch with friends, very drunk. I hear a knock on the door, and I look left and see flashlights. Thinking, crap, I start to run and realize I don't have my shoes. So I ran back for my shoes and saw my friend Matt getting grabbed by the cops. But he freaking Zoidbergs out of his hoodie and the cop is in a moment of disbelief. I get my shoes and start running to the fence. Now, this isn't a normal fence. It's one of those like 15-foot monstrosities and I'm only 5'8". I jump and my hands hit the top and my foot hits that middle piece of the fence. I'm over that thing in 2 swift motions as I hear other kids colliding into the fence trying to get over it. Only 3 of us made it over. Everyone else was screwed aside from 1. My boy hopped a side fence instead and hid under grill cover. That was a great night. Story 18. I was coming home from a friend's house at 1 a.m. and I had to be up for work at 6 a.m. I remember thinking I needed to speed home to get as much sleep as possible, and with no other cars being on the road, I turned on a no turn on red light and sped down the main road. I saw a cop in the church parking lot and his lights come on, but I kept going. I quickly turned down a side street and I remember looking in my rearview mirror as I went down a hill seeing the cop fly by the street I was going down. I realized after the fact that the 15 seconds of extra sleep would not have been worth a 100+ ticket and have since slowed down when driving. Story 19. Was wandering the Golden Gate Park at 2 a.m. with some people I met earlier. We were looking for what they called a renegade. It was a large group of people surrounding a car on a hill with a DJ set up in the trunk. Everyone was high, drunk, blah blah blah. Later, some guy yells, 5-0! It was at the part with a large public soccer field, and 2 squad cars came rushing down the field. The road behind the field curves around, and soon we saw 4, 5, 7 squad cars try surrounding the area. It wasn't even that big of a party when I was there, but once we started running away, we saw crap loads of people running away too. I guess they shut it down right as it started. It was pretty epic though, seeing a crapload of squad cars driving fast as hell to surround this small hill. They really added to the vibe with all those red and blue strobes. Story 20. About 15 hanging out with some friends at a local elementary school at night, smoking some weed and just bullcrapping. One of the guys yells, "Cops!" I have a bowl in my hand freshly packed, so me, being young and scared, threw it and jumped in some bushes like everyone else. Couple minutes later, dude starts laughing, telling us he was joking, then asked where the bowl was. I'm like, yeah man, no idea. You gotta go look for it now. Story 21. First time was back when I was about 14 or 15 years old. A friend of mine insisted on going to the local park to smoke a joint. He said he did it all the time, despite my concern. Did it anyway because stupid, but as we bake ourselves to outer space, I notice a figure walking towards us that looked like a guy walking his dog. Turned out to be a cop with no dog, but far enough away for me to tell my friend, with what little sense I had, to slowly get on his bike and start making our way toward the end of the park by a canal. Park was in a clearing, so we hang a left into the woods, convince him to dump what was a week's worth of weed, and make it to the nearest intersection where 3 cop cars pull up and search our butts. Technically got caught, but didn't have crap on us, so they took our names and addresses and went on their merry way. The second time was on the highway, doing about 90 on the far left lane, but on a section that curved right, so by the time I saw the state troopers it was too late, so committed to my speed for a bit, passed the curve, saw him start turning around to come get me, but I casually slowed down and started making my way to the far right lane. By the time I got there, a semi was pulling up on the lane to my left, so I used him to keep me out of line of sight from the cops and slowed to 65, switched to lanes to be behind him as the cops passed ahead, then went back around on his left as the cops floored it to the closest exit, thinking I must have bailed off the highway. Great success. Was 19 at the time, so the stupid crap is well and over with these days. Story 22. When I first emigrated to the US, I lived in a very wealthy, very small, very white neighborhood. My foster parents lived on a golf course within a country club in New York. Anyway, one night I was walking home from my job and noticed a car following me. When I turned to look, he turned on this bright light right in my face. I took off running. I'm not a Kenyan for nothing. Dude turned on his lights and tried to make me stop, but I was gone. I ran across the green, up the sandbank, all the way home, about a mile, banged on the door crying. My 69-year-old mom opens the door and I fall in crying, saying someone was trying to kidnap me. My mom gave the cop a good talking to and even made him apologize to me. The next day she took me down to the cop shop with a box of Dunkin' Donuts and introduced me to all the cops. We had a good laugh and I got over my fear of cops. They were all pretty cool. After that, every time I was late on the train or felt scared, I went by the station and got a ride home in the back of a squad car. One time I did a thing. I vandalized the car of a random person who attacked me, and the cops absolutely let me off and refused to charge me. In fact, they threatened the attacker with a charge if he pushed further. I am very lucky. Story 23. I was a lanky middle school kid smoking weed behind a building in Canada. I ran short distance track at the time, so I was gone as soon as I saw them taking the corner, and I guess they decided that the chase wasn't worth the effort. I looked back and they were miles behind me and just ran back home and didn't even think of this story until now. Funny thing is, I still smoked weed in that same spot for years and never had any trouble. Story 24. I was at a college party that got busted by the cops. They were in the apartment, second floor, giving out underage drinking tickets one by one. I went out to the balcony where there was a group of a couple dozen students and one cop outside on the ground level. I tried getting some people together to make a go of jumping down and legging it, perhaps only one person getting nabbed, but people were too hesitant. I ended up going for it solo anyway. Landed near the cop, recovered from the drop, and ran for all I was worth, jumping fences for a few blocks. Heard the cop's footsteps at first, but he didn't want to go too far to leave the balcony unsupervised. Found out from someone later he'd thrown his flashlight at me. Story 25. Speeding to my friend's house. Pass a cop going probably 30 over the limit. I say screw it and floor it. Turn onto my friend's street, pull into his driveway, and I'm able to hide my car behind his mom's while the cop goes flying by. I was 16 and a total idiot. I didn't learn though. I got away 2 more times and I've never done it again. Happy to hear the character growth, OP. Going that fast to avoid the cops is just not worth it. Like at any point, a deer or something could just walk onto the street, and that's just not a good situation for anyone involved. Story 26. 9 p.m. Was going well over 110 miles per hour. A few cars spread out but no traffic. I pass a cop, didn't see him until I passed. I didn't let off. I saw his headlights turn on and his overhead blue and reds go on as he went onto the roadway from where he was hiding. I got to a bend in the highway, and right after the bend in the highway, there was an exit. From when I saw the cop to after I got on the exit was about 1.5 miles, I would assume. When I stopped at the stop sign, a cop went flying onto the on-ramp, I assumed to try to intercept me or get eyes on me. Little did he know I was right behind him getting off. Nothing crazy. I just switched the route on my GPS and took back roads for a little while before getting back on. This was on I-95 south somewhere in Georgia when I was making a trip to Florida. A disclaimer, do not run from the police. If the officer got behind me close, I would have pulled over. Story 27. It was the wildest date ever. We had just left a local music festival on the way back to his place and we noticed a squad car edging out after us. My date tells me his plates are expired and before I can even wrap my head around it, he hangs a right, hooks another, slams in a park and climbs out. I fly out after him just as the squad comes down the street. Without a word, he grabs my hand and we run. We hop a waist-high gate into someone's yard, duck through the bushes into the alley, and we must have run for half a mile before we decided it was safe to walk back. The cop probably rolled his eyes and took off when he saw us book it. But bless his heart, that little scare, that moment of teenage irresponsibility, was one of the most exciting and romantic evenings of my life. Story 28. I was 16 smoking pot in a park with friends. Cops show up. Screw this crap. I'm out. I'm a heavy dude and not athletic, but the combined power of marijuana and adrenaline turned me into a machine. Sudden problem. One of the group members that I don't know very well is in front of me. If I suddenly turn in muddy yard, I'll fall. If I suddenly stop in muddy yard, I'll fall. Hey, screw it. Too high? Don't give a crap. They'll never take me alive. I push her into the mud and dead sprint all the way back to my friend's house. Not completely sure why, but she never came back out with us. Story 29. One night I was driving too fast and saw the police officer clock me and pull out after me. So I pulled over into a parking lot to get my ticket. The police officer sped off down the road I turned down on and I guess assumed I had tried to speed away. That guy was either on another call or he played himself. OP, that wasn't your fault, But hey, got off a ticket. Story 30. Obligatory not me, but I was in the military as medical on a training course. Nearly all of us were normally civilian doctors and nurses with limited real military training as far as combat readiness goes. Part of the course was a nighttime escape and evade exercise that was basically hide and seek in the woods. They flew over a helicopter for noise distraction and had taught us some fundamentals. They gave us a red card and informed us that there were US Marines out there looking for us who got rewarded for collecting red cards from every idiot they detected. We had 2 hours to cross the woods and reach a lighted tower without being spotted. The winner was a guy who just walked to the light tower without hiding while loudly muttering about the stupid freaking Marines and the stupid training exercise, and he just wanted to have a cheeseburger. All the Marines assumed he was already detected and had his card pulled, and they focused on idiots like me trying to sneak around. He walked up to the officer at the light tower and handed in his red card for the victory. Story 31. Riot in my college town. I was knocking over a lamppost with a stranger when the cops showed up. I took off but got tackled from behind. Popped up to my feet with the cop still grabbing my ankle, yanked my foot out of his hands, losing my shoe in the process, and then hightailed it into the crowd, running bent over to stay hidden. Circled back to my place, changed my clothes, and rejoined my friends rioting. Breaking tackles saves degrees. Story 32. Used to live right by a lake. Every night we would go to smoke at this crappy beach that you had to climb rocks to get down to. Really safe spot, but not much of a view. A few blocks down there was an actual city park with a nice beach at the end and an absolutely gorgeous view of the Toronto skyline. It was so wonderful. I mentioned how we're dumb for never using this spot. So we start setting up the bong and spreading our stuff out when my roommate says, "Dude, I think the cops are here." I'm usually the paranoid one who says that, but this time I turned to him and laughed and said, "Nah man, you're just paranoid." And then I turned to the parking lot to see a cop flying up to the end of it. We were smoking illegally and trespassing since it was after park close, so we booked it. There's a setup of large rocks around the lake. I'm holding the backpack, bong, and grinder as I run across them, and then just start throwing everything down between the rocks as I'm running. We ran about a block on these rocks, and hid under a tree for 40 minutes. We went back home, but we weren't quite done. If we just left our stuff on the rocks, some stoner would take it in the morning. So we went back a couple hours later, and I fell in the lake trying to recover all my stuff. I got everything back except the grinder. Story 33. I had expired tags and couldn't get my car to pass emissions, so I just kept driving it anyway. I pull out of work one day and there's a cop car down the road heading toward me. He speeds up, passing cars to get closer to me. I speed up to the red light and turn. He flips on his lights right as I'm turning. I knew there was a parking lot immediately after the right turn at the light that was well hidden by a row of hedges along the main road. I turned in and parked. My buddy asked what I was doing. Then we see the cop turn and continue down the road with his lights on, bypassing the parking lot. Since he wasn't technically at the point of pulling me over, I figured I could just play dumb. I know the cop was coming for me because he saw me the next morning and pulled me over. He mentioned he saw me the day before and was trying to talk to me about my tags. I gotta fix a ticket for that one. Story 34. I was parked up on the beach with my friend late at night having a chat. Suddenly, a car up on the road behind us puts a powerful spotlight on us. I ask her if we're allowed to be there and she says, "No." So I start the engine and start driving away down the beach. The cop car keeps tracking us with the light and following us along the road. I shift gear and nail it, driving across the sand for maybe half a mile or so. The cop car is still following us, but having a harder time of it, as they have to slow down for all these little roundabouts and speed bumps. I manage to get a big enough lead when I see a ramp by the lifeguard building they use to get their boat in the water. I drive up it, breaking my exhaust pipe in the process. I then drive across the road into a side street. Luckily, it was the street where my mate lived, so I quickly pulled into her driveway, turned off the engine and lights, and we both ducked down until the cop car had passed. Story 35. Not necessarily running from the cops, but the last night in my hometown before I left for college, 3 good friends and I went to a park to get high before seeing a movie. As we were toking away on top of this little playground, I noticed 2 cop cars driving slowly toward us. Before I could even point them out, the cars start shining their flashlights on us. 2 of my friends booked it into the woods behind us, while me and the other guy panicked and jumped onto the playground. For what seemed like an eternity, the cops kept walking back and forth past the tiny playground into the woods. They eventually found one friend who got lost in the woods and gave himself up, but the other somehow made it through and ran all the way home. They never looked under what seemed to be literally the only other place someone could be hiding. Eventually, my hiding partner had to give himself up because the cops were threatening to tow his car. The kid who got caught texted him. I don't understand how they didn't see us, as they kept shining their lights on the playground, which had very little cover. After everyone had gone from the park for at least half an hour, my paranoid butt finally mustered up the courage to pull out my phone and check on everyone. I remember thinking the cops were still staked out to catch me. Turns out everyone was at the theater, waiting for me. In the end of the night, movie was And the cops were pretty nice to my friends, just let us off with a warning. I didn't grow up in the nicest area, so the cops had more to worry about than some teenagers smoking weed. I like to imagine the cops were just wondering how long Opie and his friend were going to stay down there for. Like, they super saw them, but were just like, "Say, Johnson, how long do you think those kids are going to wait in the wood chips? I got $20 on half an hour." Story 36. Was picking up H from my guy while dope sick. Guess they'd been watching him for some time and assumed I was the dealer. He gets out of the car and the van starts following me. I book it down side streets, stupid, and they throw on the sirens, so I give up and pull over. Stashed the bags on my balls. They search my car, find no dope, but find my needles. Arrested for paraphernalia. Sit in a holding cell for like 5 hours, dope still on my balls. Finally get out with a court date a month or two away. Go home and attempt to shoot up because now I've been sick for a long time. Come to find out that because I was sweating from the withdrawals, the sweat soaked the bags and basically dissolved the H onto my skin. 0 out of 10 would not get addicted again. Story 38. The police used slow utility ATVs, while my friends and I had extremely fast performance ATVs. It was very easy to lose them in tight wood trails and through fields. Later, they would come by my friend's house in police cars and try to get us to admit having run from them on the trail. With the ATVs safely locked away in the garage, we would tell them, "Nope, not riding today." Couldn't get it started, while pointing to a decrepit 3-wheeler frame in the tall grass next to the garage. Story 39. Not me, but 2 guys who lived on my floor my freshman year of college got caught smoking weed on campus. They both tried to run. One was caught while the other made it out. Our floor ended up posting bail for the one who was caught. He went to court and paid his fees. The other hid out in a friend's dorm for a couple of days and skipped all his classes. I guess the cops visited our dorm the first day after, but he was tipped off and went out a different entrance. They never caught him, and he was never fined. Story 40. We had a neighborhood paintball tournament in a local forest/park. Someone thought we had real guns, I guess, and called the cops. I was the last guy left on my team and I heard someone coming up behind me. So I jumped beneath a bush and it turns out it was a cop. Right as I'm about to book it, all 6 of the enemy team ambushed the cop thinking it was me and pelt him with at least 20 paintballs, quite a few of them to the face. Their expressions were priceless. One of them screamed cops and we all ran like hell. Never got caught, nothing ever came of it. But still scary. Damn lucky the cop didn't have a gun. Yeah, you guys are very lucky. Because if that cop just stopped and saw a bunch of weapons pointed at him, he doesn't know they're paintball guns necessarily in the heat of the moment. And I will say that poor cop, for a split second he probably thought he was dead. Story 41. I was 13 and I had earned money and wanted a hamburger. So me, my sister, 14, and her friend, 14, went walking to Jack in the Box at 11 o'clock at night. It was only 3 or 4 blocks from our apartment and my mom had told us, "Don't get caught by the cops." So we took a way that was longer but more secluded. This Jack in the Box was by a big grocery store, so after we got our food, we walked through the parking lot to get back to the side street. Cops pull in and pull up next to us, so we stop and the officer asks, "Where are your parents?" My sister says they're in the grocery store buying food. We just went across to get a hamburger, and that we were going to wait in the car. Officer says okay, and we start walking toward the last car in the lot. The police car stays and watches. My sister then goes to the door of the car, pulls the handle, and the alarm goes off. So she screams, "Run!" and we all book it down the street. The cops have their sirens on and they're following us. So we get down the street from our house, but they're right behind us. We jump the fence to our friend's yard and hide till they leave. We get home and tell our mom, and she just thinks it's funny that we could do all that with a bag of food and a full soda and didn't spill anything. Story 42. My registration was suspended and a cop waved me over. He was outside his car a little ways, and I had no time to be having my car towed on the side of the highway. Screw that. I kicked it up to 90 and took off. The look on his face as a little white girl ran from him was priceless. I wove in and out of cars until I couldn't see his lights anymore, and took an exit for a bordering city. I left so fast he didn't even get my plate, and I have the same car as half the American population. Nothing ever came of it. Story 43. I ran from a cop and his camera crew with one of my girlfriends from high school while on the Las Vegas Strip. I live here. My friend and I were drunk outside one of the casinos. Cop rolled up on us asking for ID because we look young. I only have school ID. He takes us back to his patrol car and has me put my bag on the hood of his car. I whisper to my homegirl that I'm going to grab my bag and we're going to make a run for it. My dumb butt grabs the bag and I run across the street dodging traffic. My friend and I get split up, so the cop ran after her while one of his cameramen ran after me. A random drunk tourist distracts the cameraman telling him to leave me alone, bless his soul, and I run and end up getting away and hide by some fountains on the strip. My friend got caught though, she was slow. I was really hoping they would have aired that episode on Cops or something. Reason for running was I ran away from home, was wasted, and underage. So I didn't want to get into more trouble. I look back on it now and realize I was really stupid, but it's always a fun story to tell. Look, OP, as far as I'm concerned, if you're going to do something stupid, 17 is an okay age to do it at. I think there is some truth in the idea that the delinquency of your teenage or high school years sticks with you for your whole life as a fond memory. Within reason, of course. Story 44. I'm not really proud of this, but it is what it is. A friend and I were going on vacation to New Orleans in our Jeep. I was 25 or so at the time, 36 now, and it was the first vacation I had taken since I was 16. Anyway, it was my turn to drive. My friend was dead asleep in the passenger seat, and I was speeding down the interstate in Mississippi. I don't remember how fast or even what the speed limit was. A cop was driving by on the other side of the interstate and immediately turned around to chase me. All I could think was, oh crap. I took the first exit I found, which was an incredibly busy part of the town. I pulled into a severely packed hotel and parked. I watched the cop drive by and wait for about 10 minutes before getting back on the interstate. My friend still doesn't know that I outran a cop in her vehicle while she was asleep next to me. Story 45. Not technically running. We would hop a security fence to climb a water tower. Most nights we just hung out, but on occasion would bring pebbles to target the roofs below. We were smart about it, only went up on moonless nights. Would pick a single home and target it in a short burst, then wait for lights to come on or owner to come out. A single handful 10 minutes after they went back in typically resulted in arrival of police, which we could watch rolling in from 5 miles out. We were done for the night at that point, and would watch the popo cruise the streets for 10 to 15 minutes before they got bored looking for kids on bikes bringing havoc to suburbia. On a few occasions, they got out and shined flashlights at the water tower fence, checked the gate lock but never entered, and never lit up the tower or its ladder. Only 3 of us knew the location of the trail leading to the tower back then. Listening to the other kids talk about the mysterious Pebble Polly made us feel like gods. Story 46. When I was young, 15 I think, I was doing the classic drinking in a field with friends. 2-liter bottles of disgusting cider, etc. We were having a blast, pretty wasted at about 10, when a couple of police cars showed up and they came running out towards us. Everyone scattered as fast as humanly possible, and me and my friends stuffed out cider in our bags and hid in a tiny patch of trees. I'm in a massive clearing in woods by the train tracks. In the middle of the clearing is a literally 10-meter in diameter patch of trees. So we hide inside and the police go chasing everyone else, who have all scattered like ants over a cake. We give it some time, breathing heavily, time slowly dancing past us, and we're nervous. What if we go to prison? We wouldn't survive in prison. You know, we were drunk and young and stupid and rather convinced that this was it for our basic freedom and human rights. So eventually the tension got too much and we left the patch of trees. Crap. Straight ahead of us are the police, but they don't seem to have seen us. What do we do? Patch of trees or run? Or my friend turns to me and goes, "I've got a plan." I'm like, "That's freaking great. What is it?" He says, "Follow me," and walks towards the cops. Now, I was a relatively inexperienced criminal, but I don't think you should walk directly at the police at a time like this. We had alcohol stuffed in our bags and we were freaking wasted, but I follow him. What else am I gonna do? The police eye us knowingly like, who are these idiots? We know what's up, they can't fool us. "Hello, stop there please. What are you doing out at this time?" one asks us. They have raised eyebrows, smug expressions, and I'm resigned to my fate. "We just needed some," my friend pauses, "private time." He says it with such ingenious suggestion and confidence that the cops pause, smile, and then instantly assume we're a pair of gay teenagers out in the woods for a good time who have been caught with the drunk kids. I'm trying to hold it together, trying not to laugh, scream, fart, or run, trying to look gay, whatever that means, and he lets us pass, smiles at us and tells us to go. The idiot. Or maybe he just enjoyed the lie, I don't know. So off we pop down this dirt path and towards the local town where my friend lived. We are home and free, we aren't going to prison, and I could still become everything I wanted to be. I haven't, by the way. My phone rings. It's the police. "Come back now or we're coming after you. Your friend gave us your number. We're being serious." One of my friends ratted me out, the bastard. Well, screw that. I hang up, and we run. We make it to town, order Chinese food, and play Halo at his house until my mom picks me up and has a massive go at me for being drunk. I was still wasted on cider. But hey, it's a cool story. Story 47. Well, I grew up in a rural but affluent area, so we had a lot of cops, and weed wasn't as easy to come by as in many other places. One spring, we decided to start growing it, and since we were all underage, we asked some dude from my village to drive with us to a nearby European country where we could legally acquire cuttings. We planted them in a cornfield outside of our village, and when the time came to harvest, we drove there at night with our bikes, while the one guy who was over 18 came with his car. We roughly manicured the buds and put them in trash bags. We were divided on whether to put them in the car or not. I was for it, but because I'm lazy, but decided not to risk it. Well, the guy with the car drove off, and we followed him on our bikes, when the single scariest moment in my life happened. To put it into perspective, while teenagers are stupid and arrogant, we were still aware that what we did would actually land us in jail if caught, as we had the equivalent of more than a pound of dry weed on us, in a country and time that didn't see weed the way we do now, and wandering through forests and cornfields at night did the rest. So we were driving behind this guy, tense but happy, when a police car that had been waiting turned on its lights right in front of our friend's car. We were maybe 200 meters behind, and to this day, I have never experienced that kind of panic. We turned around and took the hell off, and long story short, they didn't see us. Our friend had nothing on him, and we got away with the scare. And a crap ton of weed. Story 48. Wasn't me. My brother-in-law was notorious in his hometown for getting up to mischief on his dirt bike. He and his best friend had identical bikes and would tear through fields and streets in town. His bike wasn't street legal, and generally make themselves a thorn in the side of the local police. So one day, brother-in-law is up to his usual tricks, and one of the locals starts chasing him. He cuts across a cornfield to his best friend's place, ditches his bike in the barn, and saunters inside. The cop knew where he was heading the whole time and shows up in the driveway maybe a minute later. He knew brother-in-law and his friend pretty well, and he wasn't having any of this. Knocks on the door and drags them both outside. Brother-in-law shows him his friend's identical bike, points out the engine is cool, and gets off scot-free. The cop never figured out how he pulled that one off. Story 49. It was New Year's. I started at one party and was on my way to the next. It was 11:30 when I ran through an intersection 20 miles too fast with a cop sitting on the other side. I knew he would flip it as soon as I passed. It was a suburban area. Lots of cookie-cutter houses lined up in rows. I took my first left, still speeding. Then another left, 2 houses down into an empty driveway. I turned off my lights, turned off my car, and dove into the back seat. I could see the light beaming on the underside of my car roof. Slowly. Then darkness. Again, minutes later, slow light, then darkness. 10 minutes went by. I crawled out of that driveway and onto my party with 8 minutes to spare. Story 50. I've walked away from the cops before. It wasn't in the US or Europe, and I didn't have my ID with me, and I thought they might find me for it when they tried to wave me over. I just walked into a group of people and they just stopped other people. That's about as exciting as it gets for me. Story 51. I was 16 and had snuck out to catch the midnight release of a movie. After the movie, my friend drops me off, but I notice the house lights are on and my dad is still awake. So rather than risking him hearing me climb back through my window, I decided to walk through the neighborhood for a bit, at 3 a.m. At some point, I see a car pull into the street I'm on, so I jump behind the nearest bushes. The car stops right in front of me, red and blue lights turn on, and out comes a couple of cops with flashlights. "Come on out, buddy. We saw you. Let's talk." Now internally, I am freaking out and am frozen in fear, while the cops continue to walk up and down trying to convince me to come out. Then when they get far enough away, I suddenly dart out the other direction. I had to run across 2 baseball fields, hop several fences. Before I know it, backup has arrived, and now I'm running from several cops. I remember very clearly that this next part felt like a video game, like press X to hide and some crap. I'm running house to house, hiding in bushes and behind cars until I eventually get back home and hide in the bed of my dad's truck. Car lights drive back and forth a few times, 2 squad cars stop right in front of my house, and I start to worry they found me, but they're just talking. I'm able to get back into my room just before 4 a.m. I slept so well that night knowing I came out victorious. And I was also exhausted from running. Story 52. During college, some lads and I had drunkenly decided we would steal some streetlight banners from a local festival. Without much planning due to our inebriated overconfidence, we biked over to the festival grounds, and the nimblest among us immediately started shimmying up the streetlight, while the others looked out for cops. As it turned out, the lookouts weren't the best recruits for the job, because cop lights immediately illuminated us from across the street. Conveniently, I was parking our bikes out of sight from the street, and so was just below eye level of the road road near a long line of cleared out event tents. To give you a sense of things, there were about 20 nondescript white heavy canvas 8-foot cube tents, all lined up side by side with one side open and all the other sides walled off. The collective open side faced away from the road, so I, wizened by the liquor I'd consumed, immediately ducked behind one. Now the wait was on. In a slit in the tent's wall, I could see as my other friend talked to the officer as 4 other police cars showed up. Eventually, one of the officers saw the bikes, counted them, put 2 and 2 together, and started heading towards the only visible hiding place, the tents. At this point, my freshman, drunk, paranoid butthole was fully clenched, and I was practically shivering from the nonsensical visions of getting kicked out of school and thrown in jail were I caught. As the officer arrived at the tent line, I could only see his flashlight go in and out of every tent, taunting me with its inevitability. As the noose tightened around my neck, I had an idea. It would require luck, nerves, and most importantly, control of my motor functions, none of which at the moment I had. But I had to try, for you see halfway down the tent line, one away from me, there were some tents that were set up perpendicular to the others, so their openings faced at the beginning of the tent line, and the officer would have to step away from the line to inspect them. My idea for all its brilliance was to duck into that tent when the officer next looked into a tent, and just hope he was too lazy to check it. In an instant, I successfully pulled off my maneuver, and surprisingly, the cop did not notice. Just as planned, the cop passed me by, went back to the main group empty-handed, and eventually left after talking to my friends. Bursting with beer-fueled arrogance at the beauty of my escape, I puffed up my chest and went to talk with my friends, who had waited for me knowing I was nearby. As I began to regale them in my tale of wit and daring do, my friends cut me off and told me they had given up my name anyway, when questioned about the extra bike. Ended up the cops were nice about everything. They just told the college, who called it a day after we baked lasagna for a local homeless shelter. I think this is a very reasonable result for teenage or young adult mischief. Sounds like the authority figures involved handled it pretty well. Because hey, even after that the kids did some good. So, it all works out in the end. Story 53. I was young and stupid and about 19 to 20. I was riding with a friend, and we'll call him D. D is driving a car, a stolen one I didn't know was stolen. We're in a subdivision and cop gets behind us. D gets scared and floors it, and we go quite a way deeper into the subdivision. He stops, jumps out, and starts running. That's my cue to leave. So I dip and go up about a block or 2 and hop this 9-foot wooden fence. It's starting to get dark and I'm just about to take off running again when I look back to see a middle-aged black man on the back porch of this house, and he has a double-barrel shotgun, asking me why I'm in his backyard. I decide not to lie about it, so I told him I was running from the police and I would be gone in a matter of seconds. He stops me, says he hates cops, and invites me in. I sit at this guy's kitchen table, and then he tells me he's done prison time and didn't wish that on anyone. We just kind of talked about bullcrap and traded war stories, then says he'll give me a ride home. Oh, Pete, why did your friend have a stolen car? What happened there? I feel like that's important to explore a little bit. Story 54. Once during a house party, the cops got called and we all hid throughout the house. Some dummy lets them in, and they tear apart the whole house looking for everyone. They bust the entire party and breathalyze everyone there. Most are of drinking age and are let off the hook. Altogether, the whole cop's presence was well over an hour. I find this out the next morning after my friends tell me. I too went hiding, but after that, no one saw me again. They went looking all over the house and surrounding area and couldn't find me. After a while, I guess the party resumed and a couple was banging in a bed. The guy heard noises that was a different girl moaning, and apparently he looked under the bed and there I was wrapped in a blanket, moaning from the rhythmic bed squashing. He pulled me out by my ankles and I woke up peacefully the next morning on a couch, not knowing I had won the ultimate game of hide and seek. Alcohol. Story 55. Walking around with friends in Seattle. I'm the only girl with 3 guys. We find a construction site that has a loose gate and want to go operate some of the heavy equipment for craps and giggles. I found a stray cat and my friends were giving me a ton of crap about playing with the cat and picking it up and holding it and carrying it around. Cut to about 3 seconds later and a cop turns around, pops their lights, and lines us up after calling us out from the other side of the gate. My friends all start to stutter when the cop asked what we were doing, and I break down with fake tears and say, "I lost my cat. We're sorry for trespassing, but I found her, and I just wanted to bring her home." That kitty got a cheeseburger that night. Story 56. Much less exciting since I didn't technically run, but I was going 80 to 85 on the highway. I think limit was around 65, far left a lane and was approaching car in front of me quickly. Suddenly realized it was a cop car and slammed on brakes right as he pulled over to let me pass. He pulled back into the left lane right behind me, but luckily I had slowed way down since I saw ahead of the time it was a cop. Still speeding, but a more acceptable amount, like 70-ish. My exit was right there anyway, so I was scooting over all the lanes to get in the exit lane. It was a 4-lane highway. Since there was a cop right behind me, I made sure to switch one lane at a time, even though there were no other cars nearby. Every time I moved a lane, so did he. I was freaking the hell out. Finally got into the exit lane, he got into it for a few seconds and then pulled back out and drove off. I'm assuming he was running my plates or something, and so needed to keep following me to read it. Gave myself a heart attack that day. Story 57. High school party senior year. It was basketball season, so rather cold. Party got busted and I ran like hell. Accidentally ran over a girl who bounced off into a bush and lost a shoe. Had there been zombies behind me, they would have caught her and feasted on her brains because I left her butt there like a human meat shield. Sorry girl whose name I can't remember. Story 58. Drinking after homecoming dance at an elementary school basketball court with some friends. Somehow word got out and our group of 7 quickly turned into somewhere around 30 kids. Needless to say, the cops were called on us. 2 cops came sprinting around the corner toward us, and all of us took off into the nearby neighborhood. I remember my buddy pushed a kid we didn't know into a pool to use as bait so he and I could get away. Fast forward 2 hours later and I'm freezing my balls off in the bed of someone's truck while cop cars keep circling the neighborhoods. Some kids who got caught got driven home. Others were taken downtown and had to be picked up by their parents. I don't feel bad for the kid we shoved into the pool. He went to our rival school. Story 59. I had a buddy in high school who was fast. State champion 3 years fast. We were at a party out in the woods drinking and chilling and boom, cops show up. We run, of course, and my buddy is gone. Like, he was next to me 1 second and the next, he is 30 steps ahead. Most of us ended up getting away, including my buddy Usain. Until later that night when the cops show up at his house. The officer knew who it was because of how fast he ran. Only got a warning though, but we laughed for a long time about him getting caught for being too fast. Story 60. During this chase, the radio station I was playing through my earplugs started playing some kind of heavy metal, which made the adrenaline come harder. Anyway, I was riding my unregistered 600RR when I was younger. I'd just come back from a mountain ride when the biggest police checkpoint I'd ever seen was in front of me. At least 10 cops on each side of the road doing routine pullovers and breath tests, etc. I took a left turn to avoid being stopped and fined $1,000. They had cars ready for that. So I went back out and sped past the checkpoint. Past a cop who tried to step in front of me, who I had to avoid, while simultaneously doing the sorry gesture with my hands, then left down some back streets where I was momentarily chased by a cop car before it stopped. Then navigated through an entire suburb, pulled out on the highway entry where 2 more cars were waiting and tried to stop me, and kept going past those guys, sped past all the traffic on the highway to ensure I wouldn't be followed, went through another suburb, across a footbridge I knew which went over a giant river to another suburb, went home, hid the bike, sold it 2 weeks later. I still ride motorcycles legally now. Story 61. Friends and I are experimenting with the drugs, early high school teen years. We bought a close to empty vial of LSD, drop it in water, yeah, whatever, and pass it around so everyone can at least get some sort of trip. Well, there was more LSD in the vial than we originally thought. So we all start to get high and we honestly couldn't really judge how much we were ingesting. There were 5 people drinking on this water LSD mixture, which was in a whiskey glass. So we're all hanging out waiting to start tripping. Fast forward to around 11:30 or 12 a.m. We decided it would be a good idea to head to the pool. We're in an apartment complex, so not allowed because it's locked. We walk down and see no one's in the pool area. Sick. This is gonna be great. Maybe 5 minutes later, we see someone hop the fence. Dude sits down and he's freaking cranked. Sniffing a bunch and looking around, shirtless and swim trunks. Sick. Dude's coked out and wanting a night swim too. Suddenly, 2 girls come through this gate and then a guy with a 30 rack of beer. They're all yelling like it's a block party at what is now 12:30 a.m. Multiple people start cannonballing into the pool. In the jacuzzi that I'm in at this point, there's this little man talking about tripping his balls off, all the while I'm looking around at this mess. And I'm seeing bubbles just surfacing and bending on the concrete. It reminded me of geysers and hot springs. Anyway, we're chatting with these people and I look over and see someone else walking in through the gate. This man is fully dressed. I turn to my friend and say, "Yo, that's trouble." Confused, they look over and stare for the duration of this man walking towards everyone, who is starting to pack up their belongings while saying, "Y'all better not run. I'm gonna get one of your names." My friends jumped straight out of the jacuzzi and started running around collecting our things. Me being 16 or so, I stop and actually talk to this guy. Asks where I live, if I live in the apartments, if I know trespassing is a $500 fine and a night in jail. Nope, didn't know that. I'm not going to jail high on acid. Man turns around and starts trying to wrangle in more people, and my other friend and I just look at each other and book it out of the pool. Did the whole body jump thing you see in movies over the fence, zigzagged between apartment complexes, ran up to meet my other friends who made it first. One guy has the door open for us and I'm the last one in. But as soon as I step foot in the doorway, I immediately start vomiting. I run to the bathroom to puke more and just see shapes bouncing off the floor and faces all around the tiles. I know it's technically not the cops and there were way more of us than there were of this small bending man, but being high on LSD and hearing, "Jails, fees, I'm gonna get you" at 15 is freaking scary. Story 62. Back when I was in high school, myself and 5 other mates bought some industrial-sized cling wrap, as well as a fake dong. We shrink-wrapped it to the car of a bloke we didn't like. Let's call him Kev. We covered front and back door and most of the hood. It was around 11, so someone must have called the cops on us, but they arrived just as we were leaving down an adjacent street. We all booked it into a nearby paddock and army crawled like crazy through the tall grass with the lights and sirens going nuts. We all got away, but one of my mate's phones had dropped out of his pocket and was contacted the next day. In the end, Kev saw it as a joke, told the cops he knew us and that we were mates, and we all respected him a bit more after that. Story 63. December 20th, 2001. Buenos Aires downtown, Plaza de Mayo, Argentina. Things were getting denser and denser on the protest march. Cops started throwing tear gas, then rubber bullets, then lead bullets. I was on a side under the arches of our national bank, trying to go up some scaffolding that was there. Cops are now in full Tonton Makut mode, shooting to murder everyone on sight. Now, from my hiding spot, I could see them, but they couldn't see me. I saw how a guy my age, 18, was shot in the leg and then in the torso. Poor guy was laying about 50 meters from my position. Cops are now advancing towards my opposite direction, so I descend from the scaffolding, quickly running away from a lateral street, fleeing by some unarmed cops that were guarding a corner 2 blocks from Plaza de Mayo. I reached for my pockets, found some loose change enough for a bus ride, and 1 block away, I climbed on a bus that got me far away from that battleground. I arrived at home, put on the news, and saw several people who lost their lives to the cops. Our president ran away on helicopter, and we, as a nation, hit rock bottom. Story 64. When I was 15, me and about 5 friends wanted to go to a Denny's to hang out, drink some coffee, and smoke some cigs. But we needed gas to get there and back. So one of my friends suggested we go and siphon some gas from a car in town. After collecting the water hose and empty can, we started driving around looking for our mark. We found a car parked outside of an apartment complex next to some bushes that we could hide in while we were filling the can. The car had the gas cap under the license plate, which took us a bit to find. Meanwhile, our other friends were waiting up the road to turn on their lights as a signal that a car was coming. Just as the gas can was about half full, I noticed a car turn up the road, and our friends' headlights came on as they quickly drove away down a side street. I was just pulling out the hose to hide in the bush with my friend when the red and blue lights started to flash. My friends yell, "Run, it's the cops! We're so screwed now!" So we start to run and we hear the doors of the car shut behind us as the cops yelled, "Stop where you are!" We ran alongside the complex and to a fence that had a cow field on the other side. Luckily, one of the fence boards was loose, so we squeezed through sideways and kept running. One of the cops could fit through and continued to chase us, telling us to stop, but we kept running full sprint to the other side of the field that had a 6-foot hog wire fence that we scaled over. Some low-income housing was on the other side, and we ran through that to a wooded area that I knew had a trail that led to the road back to our friend's house about a mile away. Luckily, there were ditches and brush to hide in because about halfway to my friend's house, we jumped into the ditch as we saw headlights coming. Sure enough, it was the Fuzz again driving around with their spotlight on. We made it back to our friend's house where they were waiting to see what happened and with a half-full can of gas. We filled up the car and were just about to leave to Denny's when my friend's brother came home, heard the story, just gave us $40 and told us to have a good night after laughing his butt off for about 2 minutes. Story 65. Friend of mine told me this story. He and a friend were at a local park back in high school and there was an abandoned car. Had been there for a while. They wanted to have fun and see if they could rip one of the doors off. So as they're doing that, the park rangers show up and start questioning them. My friend's friend starts patting his pockets and looking around at the ground. The ranger says, "What are you looking for?" He responds, "Your probable cause," and then books it. My friend follows. After some time, they came back out of view and saw the police were waiting by the car, assuming it was theirs. He must have had the probable cause bit locked and loaded. No way you come up with that on the fly. I refuse to believe it. If he did, though, your friend's friend has some impressive comedic chops. I gotta give it up. Story 66. I was on I-20 heading west just outside of Fort Worth, doing about 85. Came over a little rise and there's the cop in the center divider. Held the brakes for just a second until I was even with him, and then let up and slowed without having my brake lights blasting, hoping he would ignore me. Nope. Saw him U-turn. By now I'm down to 65, and I'm also about a quarter mile ahead of him. Just as I see him get up to speed heading west, a guy with a Louisiana plate who I had passed about a mile before goes blasting past me at 80. As the cop gets closer, I'm getting ready to pull over, but he still doesn't have his lights on, so I hold in the right-hand lane doing 65. He gets even with me, briefly, and kinda points and waves and then hits it. Almost a half mile later, I see him with Mr. Louisiana pulled over. Story 67. Not me, but my brother. There was, let's say, a violent incident that happened at my mom's house while I was asleep on the 3rd floor. My mom had to take my stepdad to the hospital as a result of the incident, and the police were called. They had a description of my brother and what he was wearing, and they drove past him because he was sitting calmly on a bench outside of the gas station, and when they went past, he just walked away. When the police knocking at the door woke me up, I figured out what happened, told them that he was wearing a hoodie, and the police said, "Oh, I think we drove past him." They went back and he was gone. Ended up finding him a few weeks later, but it was an interesting couple of weeks. Story 68. I was probably about 16 at the time. A buddy of mine lived in a small town a few minutes outside of where I lived, and let's call him Billy. One night, our group of friends ended up at Billy's place and decided to go on an adventure. We end up at the local elementary school and decide to climb on top of it to light off some leftover fireworks. Needless to say, lighting fireworks in a small town at 3 a.m., a few weeks after the 4th of July, well, that attracts a lot of attention. We shoot off maybe 2 or 3 shells as we start to hear sirens and can see the lights start moving our way. We all jump off the roof and scramble to Billy's car. He assured us that he knew a shortcut home. We haul it down Main Street of the town as we can see headlights starting to gain on us. Just when I thought we were through, Billy drives off the road just before a bridge, takes a hard turn by a river that ran along the edge part of the neighborhood, and suddenly we're driving on a 4-foot wide clearance with the river on one side and people's backyard fences on the other. We follow that path for maybe 2 minutes, and that felt like eternity. Suddenly the fences end and we drive up into somebody's backyard and through the clearing between the houses, only to pull into his driveway right across the street. To this day, I still wonder how he found that shortcut originally. Story 69. Went with a friend to a private poker game in a back room of a pool hall. I'm coming out of the bathroom when about 5 to 6 police walk into the game with a couple $100 on the table. They begin to arrest everyone for illegal gambling, and I go back to the bathroom, force the screen on the window out, head out through some hedges and into the woods. I walked the really long way home, about 6 miles, and free. All the others had to pay a fine and court costs of roughly $600. Right place, right time, huh, OP? I can just imagine the 180 coming out of the bathroom. Just like, actually, you know what? I wasn't done in there. Story 70. When I was a kid, there was a neighborhood built right by where I live. Me and a group of around 6 kids would go up there and build bicycle jumps from the wood they were using for construction. One of the days we were there, a cop came rolling by. I was too young to realize we were trespassing and vandalizing, but it didn't matter though. As soon as he flashed his lights, we were gone. All of us book it down a hill, what would have been 2 houses' backyards, trying not to crash. We all lived close by, so there was no way he could have caught up because the way the roads were designed. Story 71. Not exciting, but was late on a probation payment, and they decided they wanted to put me in jail. Hauled it out of the courthouse and into an alley. Called up a buddy of mine, told him what was happening, and he came to pick me up. Went to the bank and got more money. Then sent in my father to pay my probation and what I was behind on. I wasn't about to go back in there with the risk of getting arrested. They took the payment and removed the warrant on my arrest. Story 72. My sophomore year of high school, I was at a party that got busted. Everyone inside was freaking out. There were probably 30 to 40. Me and 3 friends instantly, once we saw the lights and people said the cops were here, sprinted out the back door, ran straight into the cornfield and didn't stop until we hit the road. Once we got to the road, we just nonchalantly walked back to the house. Everyone had left. We got in our vehicles and slept it all off. Edited to add, the cops didn't arrest anyone or anything, basically showed up, said they're gonna come back in 20 minutes or something like that, and whoever's left is getting arrested. To my knowledge, they never did. If they did, they never bothered us in our vehicles. Story 73. In high school, my older brother and his friends decided to drive around Detroit for some reason, and when they got back home, the bed of his truck was full of construction barriers, so naturally, living right by a busy main road, we thought it would be a great idea to block off part of the main road and watch the cars slow down, while we laid in the grass of a little park area at a corner of my street. Well, sure enough, about 20 minutes later, we see 3 cop cars squealing down the road from all directions. All 7 of us scattered throughout the neighborhood running from the cops. I jumped into my neighbor's backyard and hid, while they made their way down the road, and when the coast was clear, I walked over to my car and acted like I was getting something out of it before walking into the house. They searched for half an hour, and everyone started walking into my house one by one. We watched them from my room upstairs out the window. When my mom heard us running into the house, she started yelling, "What have you boys gotten into? Those cops better not be looking for you!" While all the windows were open on the main floor. We had to tell her to stop yelling questions at us because we didn't want the cops to hear. I've never been so scared in my life. It was the summer before going away to college, and I thought for sure my life was over. Story 74. I've been pulled over with a good amount of weed before. Only 1 to 2 pounds, but several times, and before it was legal. CHP, Police and Border Patrol. Don't smoke in your car. That gives them a reason to search, and don't ever run from the cops if they're pulling you over. Whatever charge you think you're facing is probably less than an automatic felony, fleeing and evading. Story 75. A few years back, I was on my way out of state to visit my brother. It's a 4-hour drive legally. I left around 3 a.m. and hit the road. No one on any of the freeways and was cruising around 90 the whole time, blasting music. 2 hours in, I look behind me and notice an SUV with lights on. They were about 300 feet back. I nail the gas. I was in a 99 WS6, so I got to about 150 before I couldn't see the lights anymore. Pulled off and drove into a trailer park, and went to the back of the park, turned off the car, and waited for about 10 minutes. The rush was unbelievable. I'd just gotten a speeding ticket a few weeks prior, so getting a second one on a clear road really didn't resonate with me. Got back on the freeway and drove the speed limit the rest of the way. Never saw a cop the rest of that morning. Well, I was gonna say, OP, if you really didn't want a speeding ticket, maybe don't speed? Crazy thought, I know. Story 86. Was at a party at a friend's house that got broken up by the cops. A friend and I climbed out a window, up and over the backyard fence, and across the street into a field that had decent-sized ditch. Saw a cop car come around and ducked into the ditch. Could see their spotlight moving over the field, but they didn't care enough to get out of their car, or they would have seen us 10 feet away. Eventually, they drove off and we walked back home. Story 87. So I pulled up to a red light in my crappy Toyota Tercel next to a sports car. I was laughing at the absurdity of trying to race this guy, so I look over and rev my engines, egging him on to race. He laughs too and the light turns green and we're off and I'm immediately losing. Cue the cop car with the lights on, pulling him over, not me. So I feel terrible as I caused this for him, but I'm not the one the cop is stopping, so of course I just left. Me getting a ticket too isn't gonna help that dude. Story 88. Up on a wooded mountain in Washington with all my high school friends. We had left all of our cars at the bottom, near the only logging road up. The few lifted trucks that could make it up the logging road were piled high with teenagers and kegs. We lit bonfires up there, drank ourselves stupid, fought and screwed in the woods, and knew no cop cars would make it up the road. As we came back down the road, however, they were waiting for us. I saw the glow of cop lights, panicked, and jumped out of the bed of the truck I was in, fell down the side of a mountain, rolled for several minutes in pitch black, cutting myself on all the branches and rocks, got up, felt no pain, walked all the way home 2.5 hours later, and was the only kid who didn't get an MIP. The pain came for the next month. Story 89. I was on an unregistered bike with no mirrors riding dirty. This was in the middle of the night about a decade ago. I passed a cop that hit a quick U-turn half a block after passing me. I took an immediate turn, then another, turned fast into an alley praying there would be something to tuck behind, and magically, there was a dumpster. I turned off the bike, rolled behind laying as flat as I can, and a few seconds later a bright flashlight rolls by from the cop car and it speeds on. Lady riders on tiny bikes for the win. Story 90. As a kid, we would do this absolutely stupid thing where you would bend over, breathe heavily until you got lightheaded, then someone would push you on your chest until you passed out. For some reason, we jumped the fence into our local school and were doing it in the entrance. I think because it was well lit. Anyway, cameras must have seen us and we saw a police car pull up at the gate. Everyone ran towards the sports field because it was pitch black and easy to escape from. I jumped over the wall and went the opposite direction. The police car followed me as I jumped over fence after fence into a park. Just as I was about to jump the final fence, I saw the police car turn into the alley. I knew it was a dead end, so I just turned around and ran to my friends. We all just laid on the fields, heads down, as the police car drove around with the lights and somehow didn't catch us. I'm sure they would have just told us to go away, but it was exhilarating and I felt like a boss. Kind of unrelated to the story, but like, what's this thing with kids and passing out? Is it because the oxygen deprivation feels like a mini high? Because this is pervasive throughout generations. There's not just one generation of kids that did this. Kids, for some reason, are always looking for ways to pass out. What's going on there? Story 91. 8 years ago, in my college days. It was midnight. I'm on my way home using my dad's motorcycle, and then suddenly, the vehicles in front of me slowed down. I realized that there were a few police officers in the next junction doing random checking. It's common here, but I never knew they did it at midnight, too. Well, crap. I still don't have my license. so I slowed down just like the others, pretending to stop and then speed up right away. I went through some small street. That junction is right in front of my high school, so I knew that area well, and I couldn't sleep when I arrived home. Story 92. Not policed, but still. I'm a dumpster diver. Me, my brother, and some friends broke into a garbage depot that has electronics and crap, and we were rummaging through a pile of old computers when some old hag with nothing better to do came driving around with a flashlight. We ran and hid until she drove away. I guess she saw someone of us, cause a couple of minutes later the owner of the dump came and opened the gates and was searching for us. He found my brother and friends, but not me, because I hid away from them. There was a better spot closer to me than them. I hid under a door for about half an hour until they were gone and done talking to my brother and friends. I don't have a record and I don't plan on getting one. OP, I don't know if anyone plans on getting a record. I feel like that's something that just happens due to consequences of your actions. Story 93. When I was younger and much dumber, I had a group of friends who rented a house from one of the friends' dads. It was on Main Street, and we could see the cop shop from the front window. They paid the rent by selling pretty large amounts of weed and psychedelics, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, the week after we had my 18th birthday party, we had one for another girl that got busted because of a noise complaint. This wasn't a normal house party raid, though. We left those cops outside from about 10:30 to a little after midnight. One idiot who lived in the house yelled, "I'm gonna get my gun!" So they waited for a warrant and called in like 5 other small town squads in our closest big city who came with SWAT. It was a crazy couple of hours with a lot of shenanigans, but 96 people had to go to court. One got away without anything because she wasn't drunk. About 5 people climbed into the crawlspace attic and I got away with my weed. One of my shoes was in another room, and after I was searched, I asked to go get my shoe and a friend was laying on the bed. He ended up with alcohol poisoning. I put my hand on the bed to lean down and see if he was okay, and I put my hand right on my weed. I knew it was mine because I'd been laying there when he came to lay down after puking. And from that room I heard, "Get down! Get down on the ground, now!" And I was like, well, might as well get up and see what's going on. Turns out the only person who's 21 was also on parole. He tried to run alone. Dude ended up kicking out the back window of the cop car and opening the front door, getting his ID and crap and running. But this absolute jerk he was with gave them all his info, including his social security number. Like I said, lots of shenanigans. Anyway, I go to the front porch where there's a male cop breathalyzing the males and a female cop for the females. I get in line, and there's a couple in front of me who get breathalyzed, and then there's some kind of commotion. The male cop says, "Anyone who is breathalyzed, stand over here." So I just kind of moved to the side with the couple. It was only a minute or two before the male says to us, "You guys were breathalyzed." I giggled at that and nodded my head. Then the female cop says to me, "Oh, what about you?" And I said, I'm good, and proceeded to walk into a cop car and then down the street to where my friend's dad was picking me up. So much hilarious stuff happened that night, but also looking back, it could have ended really badly. Story 94. Many years ago on a motorcycle, cop caught me pulling a wheelie in town. He flipped on his lights and turned around to come after me. Luckily, there was the on-ramp to the highway. Hit over 100 by the time I got to the bottom of the on-ramp. Cop got to the ramp and turned off his lights and never got on the highway. I'm sure there are more. Story 95. I was 18 and 21 is the legal age to drink where I am. Friend wanted to get drunk, so we got his older brother to get booze. We both finished a bottle of vodka. I was a bit bigger than him, so he got a lot more wasted than me. Long story short, we go for a walk outside. He goes from house to house banging on the doors. Finally, the cops show up with a big spotlight. I tell him, "We gotta go," and had to drag him across the street. His glasses fall off, so he pushes me away and runs back to get them. In front of the cops. I'm yelling at him to just leave them. His house was 2 doors down, so I get back to his house and keep yelling for him. He somehow got into his neighbor's house and passed out on the couch. They told the cops where he lives and they came to his house. His brother's friend, Snitch, told the cops I was inside. So he comes in and tells me to go out there. I say, okay, I'll be right out. Immediately I run out the back door, jumping fences like it was my job. Still drunk, but this sobered me up quite a bit. I hear the cops yelling at me, but I kept running. Hid in some trees by a school, and my girlfriend, who is now my wife, picked me up at 3 a.m. My friend called me the next day from jail, mad I wasn't with him. All I can say was I tried to help him. Sorry for the long story. Nah, OP, you tried to help him. You did everything you could. If he doesn't want to run, if he wants to go get his glasses, that's on him. Story 96. A couple years back, had just turned 18, got a scholarship, and was headed off to college soon. I'm from Chicago, and my friends and I enjoyed a pastime known as urban exploring. essentially breaking into interesting abandoned buildings to find relics, photograph urban decay, reclamation by nature, etc. Not to brag, but we were some of the best in the biz. Anyway, myself and 2 others drove out to a suburb to break into a very recently abandoned hospital. This one was riskier than normal, because parts of the building still had power, i.e. active alarms. There was also some radiology equipment and wasn't entirely cleared out of medical records. This did make for some really nice photos, but also made it an understandably higher priority for law enforcement than, say, an abandoned school. The hospital was pretty huge, but there was a smaller radiology wing that was connected to the rest of the building by a single hallway. It was while we were in there that the police arrived. We aren't sure if we triggered an alarm or if someone saw us from a window and called on us, but we saw the police pull up from the second floor. The connecting hallway was on the first floor, so we tried to make our way down, but the cops had already entered the building. We were able to make our way to a small room with wide open double doors on opposite ends. One of these double doors opened into a hallway that was being patrolled by an officer with a K9. This hallway was also our only route to the main building, which was large enough that we could probably successfully evade and escape. All 3 of us hid behind an open door in the corner, watching the officer and K9 walk up and down the hallway through the hinge, but we had seen multiple cars pull up outside, so we only had so much time until someone checked the room from the other entrance, from which we were plainly visible. Thank God we hadn't recently smoked weed or brought any, because we would have been found by the dog immediately. Thank God none of our phones rang too. Whenever that officer passed the door, he couldn't have been more than 5 to 10 feet from us. After walking up and down the hallway a few times, the officer and dog briefly rounded a corner and we made a stealthy break for it. We made it to the main building, got a map of the building from a posted fire escape packet, and found a way out with no cops in sight. Walked to my friend's car parked in a residential area, and drove past the cops on our way home, still looking for us. Story 97. I was creeping through some thick bush with a few friends to get a good spot to jump into a music festival. We got to the bottom of the hill and started to make our way across the flat, grassy area. We only got a few steps, then saw 2 police on horses heading towards us. We took a couple steps back under the tree line, then dropped to the ground and lay flat. The cops heard something, so they approached our position. They got about 5 meters away, but stopped just short. Luckily, it was pitch black and the grass was pretty ragged, so they didn't get off their horses and nick us. They stood there for about 3 minutes looking around trying to figure out what they saw, then decided we were ghosts and turned around. They got about 10 meters away, and 2 friends behind me got up and ran. The police heard them breaking through the bush and came back to where they were. I hadn't moved. They didn't want to go too far into the bush or get off their horses, so somehow I missed their detection. When they trotted away, I waited till they were about 100 meters away, then bolted for the fence that was about 80 meters away in an almost opposite direction. I don't know if they heard me again or what. I just bolted and jumped the fence when I got there. Once I was in, I was just part of the crowd. Never got pursued, really, as far as I know. Story 98. It was 12 a.m. Me and a couple of friends were standing in the middle of the road. I don't know why. At the end of a street, we see a cop car pass by, but the car was traveling at an average speed, so we couldn't exactly pinpoint whether it was a car or a cop car. Anyway, when that cop car passed by, one of my friends said, "Dude, that was a cop car." We all thought he was bullcrapping, so we took it with a grain of salt. Immediately after that, we see a car take the corner down on the street where we were standing, and the same friend who said it was a cop car started running, as well as my other friend. In the heat of the moment, I tried to gain momentum to run, but figured the car would catch up quicker than I could run, so I just stopped while my friends kept running. The cop pulled up beside me and was surprisingly nice, just asked who I was, and if I had a way back home, and where my friends went. Apparently, when he was driving past that street that we were standing, he thought there was a street fight, so he went to investigate. Later, he drove off. He took a right and found my friends near an open car dealership. Same thing happened. Asked who they were, if they had a way back home. And once he got his answer, he was chill about it. Told us to have a good night. My friends walked me home and we discussed how chill that cop was. I guess this wasn't running from the police for myself, but it was kind of for my friends. Story 99. I'm 13. About year 2001. I'm playing doorbell ditch with 2 friends. It's all fun until we hear police sirens. The cops show up in the neighborhood and we start running. Unfortunately, one friend is a 6-foot 14-year-old boy. He gets tackled. I hide under some bushes. I don't know where my boyfriend went. I watch as the cop handcuffs my friend. I wait about an hour, then walk to another friend's house and call my mom to pick me up. She never finds out. Turns out the police were called because of the 6-foot friend. An old lady had seen him ring her bell and run. She became scared an adult was going to murder her. The cop handcuffed my friend and took him to the old lady's house to apologize. No charges filed. Story 100. I was on a road trip looking at colleges. I was driving my dad's a nice sporty car, and my mom was napping in the passenger seat. Since the roads were quiet and my mom was out, I decided to go fast. I passed a cop at around 100 miles per hour. I watched him through my rear view, turn his lights on, and he pulled out onto the highway. I was still going pretty fast, though, and was far ahead of him as I crested a hill and dropped out of sight. There was an exit, so I took it and pulled into a gas station. Woke my mom up and said, "Okay, Mom, it's your turn to drive now." Never saw that cop again. Story 101. Brings me back to good old high school parties. Basically, someone from school had a huge house party that almost everyone from my class attended, including me and a friend. When the cops came, you had the cliche guy running into the kitchen and yelling, "Cops!" And you would watch as almost 117 18-year-olds scattered every which way. Most people, including myself, all ran out back to jump the fence. A problem was, on the other side, there was a rose bush. The next day you had at least 5 students in each class with cuts all along their arms, legs, and faces. Oh, and the friend that was with me was a 4'11" girl who was brilliantly small enough to fit in the open washing machine. Told me she spent like an hour or so in there before popping out and going home. Isn't there a thing that hiding in washing machines and dryers is really dangerous, actually, because they don't open from the inside? Or am I misremembering? All I know is that there's a bit of a kerfuffle about that. Story 103. It wasn't me, but I was involved in hiding a horde of drunken fresh grads and high school kids from cops busting a next-door graduation party. I was pulling up to my parents' house. I was a year out from high school and got a call from a friend asking if I was home. I said yes, and a bunch of them started appearing out of nowhere. Apparently, cops chased them into the woods behind our house and were now running dogs through to hunt them down. They continued telling me their stories when all of a sudden, someone clicks on a flashlight halfway through walking my yard. I told everyone to go inside and they booked it in. A police officer walks up and asks, "Oh, what are you up to?" Told him I'm not up to anything, just having a few friends over. Officer insinuates straight away I'm hiding the kids he's after, and that my friends I'm having over are them and have been drinking underage. I say I have no idea. I wasn't at the party they busted, and I don't track if my guests have had a drink or not. I tell him to hold on, I'll get my mom, and never went back out. 13 or so kids spent the night in my parents' basement, and the cops eventually gave up. Caught only one out of dozens of kids. Imagine being the one kid they caught, though. I'd be mad. I'd be like, are you kidding me? No one, just me? Is this just a skill issue? Story 104. Like 18 years ago, I got busted hopping the fence at a sand quarry after hours. We wanted to swim there. So 2 cops start taking everyone's data just to call our parents. Nothing too major. Only I had recently moved and didn't remember my postal code and got nervous. So when one of the cops asked me for my data, I told him the other one already wrote it down and vice versa. Story 105. This prompt makes me realize I have way too many of these stories. Myself, my brother, and my friend are back in my hometown on the way to see a movie. We just finished toking and were coming to a speed change from 45 to 35. I told my friend to slow down, but my request fell on deaf ears as he cruised right along at 40. Sure enough, the next car we pass is one of the boys in blue making sure we're late to the movie. Cop pulls the U with his sights set on us. But he hasn't hit the lights yet. I toss everything under the seat as survival instinct kicks in, as I think how my mom would crucify my brother and I if we were arrested smoking together. Before the cop makes it all the way around, I tell my friend, "Take your next right into this restaurant, park in the back and get inside." Luckily, he didn't see our faces as we made it through the doors right as the cop made it to the vehicle. He then proceeds to sit on it. We figure screw it, we'll catch a later movie and just grab some lunch and wait this out. Now, you have to realize, local PD doesn't have much to do, so terrorizing the local potheads is as good as it gets for them. About an hour and a half has passed and only more cops have arrived. 3 squad cars covering every exit. Coming up on hour 3 and the story is still the same. What must be the entire force is waiting to see who claims the white sedan. Leaving in the car we came in is now out of the question. We ultimately ended up getting a ride with a buddy back to my place where we grabbed my car and made the movie at a much later showing. The kicker is when we went to pick up the car 9 hours later, there was still an undercover lurking. Ended up not retrieving it until the following morning. Story 106. Me and a group of friends were up to no good on a street. One of my friends got into an altercation with a person living there. Suddenly, 5 cop cars turn up, lights flashing from all directions. Most of us were on bikes. The police mounted the pavement and went off-road. We all scampered in different directions. The town I lived in, we have cycleways. Wide paths for riding bicycles, but big enough to fit cars on. 3 of us made it to one of these paths, on bikes, being closely followed by a cop car. I took a chance and decided to act normal, cycling at a leisurely pace. Cop car speeds straight past me, then comes to a sudden stop. Cop got out and I really thought, oh no, they caught me. The cop ignored me and started running after one of my friends. My 2 friends were too fast for him, shot through some thick bushes and across a road. The cop was stuck. The only way he could get to them was a 5-minute detour around all the bushes and trees. I rode right past him, carried on with my journey as if I were just a normal cyclist. There were about 9 of us. An hour later, this was before the days of mobile phones, we all meet up in a completely different area. All of us had dumped out jackets and bikes. Not one of us were caught that day. Story 107. Never ran from them on foot. I've evaded them several times, though. Took a side road after seeing the lights flip on when they passed in the opposite direction, or simply hid in a bathroom stall or another business after I got made by the store clerk for shoplifting. Never try to run from the cops. If they make you and they're within 40 feet of you, all you're doing is delaying and magnifying whatever they're going to try and make stick. Unless you're a track and field star, you probably can't outrun them. Stealth and misdirection are the only options. Story 108. Was out at a bar with some mates and everyone decided we were moving. I didn't get the memo where we were moving to, so I just followed everyone else. Turns out we were going to an old, possibly condemned, not sure if official, football field. Obviously, there are a lot of no trespassing signs, and it's occasionally patrolled by police. Well, we go exploring around, eventually scroll our way to the press box and then to the roof of the press box. It's very quiet and peaceful and we stay for a short while. Well, when we decide it's time to go, we almost get out of the press box when we see a cruiser with a spotlight. They're looking around by the entrance. There are other idiots on the opposite side of the field with flashlights that don't see the cops, and so the cop decides to walk onto the field and look around. We hightail it back onto the roof because there was some climbing to get up there, and no cop would go through that just to catch a bunch of kids. Plus, we'd be out of sight. We waited out till the cop leaves and strategically move everyone down and out a back entrance we found, climbing under fences and hightail it back home. That's about the most running or hiding from cops I have. Story 109. In high school, my parents' friends had horses, but they didn't ride much. And I had friends who rode as well. Free access to horses for a bunch of broke teens. We went on trail rides. The community center had a cross-country course that we took random jumps over with these out-of-shape horses. We rode through drive-thrus, which sometimes freaked out people in cars, raced each other on dirt roads toward blind corners, all sorts of fun things that could have resulted in our senseless deaths. It was a horse-oriented town, so none of that got us in trouble. Being teenagers, though, we got cocky. One summer trail ride, we walked the horses off the road and stopped under some trees for shade, as we'd been out for hours and had covered some miles. Must have belonged to some paranoid bastard or been an unfenced orchard because 15 minutes later, cops roll up, lights on. Cops in that town were known for harassing teens to get the slightest probable cause. Being on the original ATV, we screwed off through the trees, over the lawn and up the hill behind the house, down the ravine on the other side, followed the dry riverbed back into town, bathed and put the horses up and laughed our butts off at our masterful escape. I'm not sure if the trees stopped the cops or if it took them too long to drive around on the dirt road and we'd managed to get out of sight. We did hear the sirens get closer or a second car, but the horses were rested enough to gallop and we had the fear of our parents urging us on. It's a wonder the horses made it without tripping. It didn't stop us from making dumb choices on future rides, but we were a bit more aware of when we were trespassing. Story 110. In the town I grew up in the Caribbean, on Halloween, after late is when all the teenagers come out to play. There were a lot of crews all in a small town area, and we were armed with paintball guns, fruits, rocks, eggs, etc. Basically, we went to war. Well, we heard cops were already around looking for people to confiscate their paintball guns, so we took different positions to shoot the cars with our paintball guns. We got their cars quite a bit, and ran like hell while they were chasing us, and they lost us. After a bit, we ran to a building that was under construction, and we went to the roof, since there weren't many taller buildings than that, and we had a good view of the streets. We see that the cops are near and looking around the area we were in, so we decide to get out of there so we wouldn't get trapped. Well, the building was right next to the school, so everyone decides to get in the school to hide. About 3 or 4 of the crew made it in, then right down the driveways of the school we see the lights. They caught us all trying to trespass into a school. I was the short, chubby kid in the group, so I wasn't over the wall yet. As soon as I see them, everyone just splits. I knew I wasn't going to make it over the wall with no help, so I just ran to the woods that were behind the school. I ran maybe like 40 yards and dropped to the dirt to see if they were going to look for me. I knew some of the cops chased the ones that made it into the school, and they weren't about to get all dirty looking for me. So after about 15 minutes or so of me in the dirt, I see the cops in front of me leave. Now all I needed to do was cross the street because our meetup point and my car were right across the street of the building we first went into. Now this is when I turn into a 16-year-old solid snake and go back to the construction side of the building. This is where I find one of my friends. We make it right to the corner of the building and the house my car is at. so we kinda recon the area and there are cops still around. At one point, I step into a pool of wet cement, so I had a foot covered up to my ankle in cement. After a few minutes, some cops leave, but like 2 or 3 of them stay. We see them walk into the driveway. That's when we book it to the house. We made it look like we were inside the whole time and we were just leaving. They didn't notice us. The ones that were chased across the school outran the cops, but one dropped his paintball gun. Some others hiked the woods to another part of town, and everyone else who ran made it out without being caught. Story 111. Accidentally set fire to a large field, almost burned down some buildings, cops and fire engines turned up. As a group of idiot kids, we just ran in all different directions, into friends' houses, out the back doors, and over the fields. No real damage, just burnt grass, thankfully. We walked back to it, pretending to just stumble on it as the fire engines were leaving. Stupidly again as kids, we made a homemade stinger like the cops have, and laid it across the road. People rang the cops. We just ran through the back alleys and knew the area better than them. Friend was speeding in a car with more than should have been in it. Cops spotted as it was really early, like 2 a.m. on a motorway. Again, we just got into an area that we knew was like a rat's maze of paths and splits. They tend to go after the driver. Plus, don't leave it long enough that they request backup or the helicopter. Underage drinking in the park. Set a little campfire in the woods. This time they got the chopper out. As the fire got larger and some dog walkers we'd seen phoned them up, but we didn't think they would come out. The chopper must have already been up in the air for something else as it was there fast. They couldn't chase us on foot through the forest because we were younger, faster, and again, knew the small paths. Split up and met back up again later. Basically be in a group, know the area, and split. Unless you're in America, of course, then just stop or die. Okay, gotta be honest. I don't know if almost burning down some buildings is just an idiot kid thing. I would have liked some more elaboration on that. What the hell did you guys do? If the cops didn't like you, it kind of sounds like they had a reason to. Story 112. It was 3 a.m. and I was coming back from my girlfriend's place in my loud as hell 2ZZ swapped MK Mark II. I was blasting music and gunning it, and passed a cop going the opposite direction. Looked in my rear view and saw him slam on his brakes. I'm about 200 yards from the street I need to turn on that leads to my road. I hit that right turn hard and pedal to the metal down about half a mile of road that brings me to the street my house is on. I get back fast and turn the car off and get out. I would have been fine right there. However, road work on my street and the surrounding area meant I kicked up a crap ton of dust, leading straight to my house. I heard the cop pass my street and frickin' 180'd when he saw the dust and headed toward my place. I ran in and locked the doors, went upstairs and told my parents not to answer the door, watched the cops pull up in my driveway and walk to my car from a window. One of them asked, "Does he have racing slicks?" referring to my tire tread. Then the other said, "No, he's just burnt those down," which was the truth. Burnouts are fun in those things in high school. They knocked on the front and back doors, then left after about 15 minutes. I never saw them blue light because I dipped so quick. Car has a fast 0 to 60, so I was in the clear. Parents weren't upset because, no harm, no foul, but be careful. Good times. Story 113. Was going down the road and passed by someone getting arrested. I saw a cop run to his car as we were passing by. I was really high, so I hit the gas. He turned on his lights and a small chase ensued. I was able to make a few quick turns and park the car with my lights off on a street. I saw the cop turn the opposite direction down the street I was on. I was home free. No. My mom had a police scanner and called me asking why the cops were en route to our house. They must have gotten my plate. I was pretty close to home and made it there before the cops. I put on some cologne and rinsed my mouth with mouthwash. Just as I got done, the cops showed up. They said the guy getting arrested said I waved a gun at him. I consented to them searching my car and they found a bunch of weed stems and seeds on the floorboard. They threatened to charge me with possession, but ultimately left and didn't charge me with anything. I feel like I should mention, or have to mention, driving under any influence, drunk or high, not a great idea. In fact, expressly a bad idea. I'm pretty harsh on drunk drivers, and I'm also pretty harsh on high drivers. I'm from a place where weed is pretty prevalent, but it's still inhibiting. You simply do not have your normal level of functioning while you're high. Therefore, operating what is essentially a fast-moving weapon, not a great idea. Anyway, OP, I'm sure the cops were just kind of glad you didn't actually have a gun and waved it at someone. But they did have to do their due diligence if someone tells them that, I guess. Even if it's someone who's just trying to get the cops off him, I assume. Story 114. Last summer, our school was closed for demolition. Me and a few friends were having a little party right next to the school. 6 beers in, we decided to go and take a last visit to the school we had gone to for the past 11 years. I climb over the fence with 2 other guys and go inside. 2 mates stayed outside. We look around, go onto the 3rd floor to wave and yell at the guys in front of the house, and then we see security roll in from the side. We started running towards the back staircase, and being drunk in a dark building, we managed to stop mere meters from a 3-story free fall. The part of the house, including our escape route, was already torn down. We then started running towards the side windows to jump out, since the security was at the front exit. I drunkenly even carried my beer through all this. I jump out of the window and hurt my knee pretty bad. The cops hear the fuss and start coming at us. We ran around the building, me still holding my beer while still limping in pain. We climb over the fence and hide behind some nearby houses, sit around for about an hour until the cops were gone, then got back to our friend's house and got back to drinking. At the time, it seemed like a game. Not for a second did I consider how it could end with a hefty fine and a criminal file. Story 115. Being little crappy preteens, my brother and I would take rubbers and put an egg and some mayo in them, then get a windmill action going and sail it into the local corner bar. After the 3rd or 4th time, the cops were called. Brother and I ran about 2 blocks to a church that had a basement, and it had a concrete wall about 3 feet from the basement windows with a metal grate on top. We pulled up the grate and hid there for about an hour or so. There was a recycle place kitty corner from the bar with huge dumpsters for cardboard and various other paper recycling. After we thought the coast was clear, we made our way there and hopped in one of the dumpsters to look across the street to the local bar. The cops were still there and people were outside milling around. Another hour and the cops left. We snuck out zigzagging back a few blocks and then up a few blocks to home. To this day, we never sit within the path of the door when at the bar. Some messed up crap right there now that I think about it. Story 116. In college, me and a few friends were packed in my Ford F-250 with an ounce of weed and 2 30 racks of beer heading to a party. A cop started following us, so I started driving down through some back streets to try to ditch him. After a few minutes of this, I was just far enough ahead of him, so I decided to pull into a random driveway, told everyone to walk out and move towards this random house like we lived there. The cop was in his patrol car just watching us walk up to this house, and when we got to the door, my friend decided to just walk into the house. All the lights were off and all 4 of us were crammed in this tiny mudroom. The cops slowly started to pull away, and as we all sighed a breath of relief, the lights turned on. Someone shouted, "Who's there?" We all bolted out of the house. Me and one friend jumped into the back of my truck, and the other 2 ran God knows where. In the end, we got away 2 times. We then finally made it to the party, and my 2 friends showed up like an hour later. We all drank to that crazy night. Story 117. Ran a 4-way stop at midnight. Didn't brake or anything. I looked left and saw 2 cops standing outside their car at a gas station. Don't know why, but I just hit the gas even though I was in a huge truck. Took the first to left, first right, and then a left, and pulled into my best friend's driveway and turned off the truck. They took the first to left, but went straight instead of the first right. Got my heart pumping. Thing was, after I calmed down, I realized my friend's parents, who were not exactly on the up and up, would have kicked my butt if I brought the cops to their house. Would have been better to pay the ticket. Story 118. Was cruising downhill in the middle of town and almost topped 60 in a 40 when I passed a cop. I saw him start to turn around in my rearview mirror. I was nowhere near home, but I was close to a little street I knew led into one of those twisty subdivisions where all the houses look the same and all the roads loop around on each other. Having been lost in that exact same burb before, I knew which path to take to make a semicircle and come out about a quarter mile down the street. Lost the cop somewhere in there. For all I know, he might still be there. Being lost in a twisty suburb for eternity? This is just a weird version of the back rooms. Story 119. Well, not really running from the cops, but I was pulled over as a passenger in a car for speeding/stunting. I ended up in the front passenger seat of the cop car. Back seat was full. Cop said he's gonna search me before he lets me go. We open our 2 front doors at the same time. I open my denim jacket, it was the late 80s, look at him as he steps out of the car, wait until he can't see me, grab the quarter of weed out of my inside pocket, palm it, drop my hand to the ground, flick it under the police car, and stand up all innocent-like. Get searched, lets me go. Had to wait for my friends. He drives off before we're all buckled into the car. I jump out, grab my bag of weed, and was briefly a legend. Story 120. This is ages ago. My year, last year of high school, is giving a party. We hire the local town's party room, hire a DJ, and party's going well. Busy night, but all good fun. Then, all of a sudden, some people start fighting. It escalates. Me, being one of the bigger guys on the team, start throwing people out. Then, the cops come in, start arresting people more or less at random. Because they see me struggling with one of the partygoers, I'm arrested as well. So here I am sitting in a combi, I guess that's a Belgian word for a police minivan, but the back door is completely open. And at one point, all cops are dragging people towards the van and aren't paying attention, so I step out and walk away. Story 121. Few years ago, I was at a local street racing spot that's out of the way on a less traveled road. Think dead end where truckers sleep occasionally. I went out there just to watch, as all I had was an old Dodge Ram pickup. This was a good meet as we had 60 to 70 cars just going at it back to back to back. Just as a Whipple SRT 8 Cherokee and a Nitrous 5.0 lined up, one local cop car came strolling our way with his lights on. Everyone dipped out and it was pure chaos. I was already in my truck getting ready to go, so I was the first one to get rolling. Everyone followed me in a single file line until we got blocked by 3 more cops. Well, me being young and dumb decided I didn't have time for that, and I proceeded to hop a curb into a solid foot of mud for 100 yards. My little 2-wheel drive Ram was spinning its little tires getting me out of that field. But I ended up on the highway feeder and hightailed it to the nearest QT. I must have passed a dozen cops with flashing lights headed towards the spot. Amazingly, out of the 60-plus cars there, only one got pulled over. He ended up getting cuffed because of guns and drugs being found. When we were all recounting our stories, a buddy said he swears he saw my little truck going 60 through that muddy field. And a cop went to hop the curb, but decided against it. Story 122. Not cop, but school disciplinary teacher. It was the last day after finals, and I'd had piercings in and was out of uniform. Guy here. This was strictly a no-no in Asian schools. Teacher dude is yelling at me while waving a newspaper. He was saying, "Boy, come here now, this instant!" Just so happens my friend's mom is driving around the compound, and I signal him to open the boot. I run and jump inside Mission Impossible style, and his poor mom, confused, just speeds off through the gates. The next year it was like a blank slate, and I never got in trouble. No, I will not be yelling in a stereotypical Asian accent. Sorry. Story 123. Not exactly running from the cops, but summertime. My cousin and I were out stealing flags off of golf course hole markers in the middle of the night. We go to one 45 minutes from our town. Last one of the night. We parked in a small parking lot for a park that was closed after dark. Proceeded to go walk the golf course and pick a flag. On our way back to the car, we see a cop car pull into where we're parked. We duck out of view and wait for him to leave. He doesn't. I have an idea. Next to the golf course is a bunch of houses. We go to the nearest road among the houses, find a large pine tree and take off our clothes. All but our under t-shirts and basketball shorts. We always wore basketball shorts under our jeans and our sneakers. We leave the flags with our clothes. We take off, jogging towards the cops. Sweaty and out of breath, we get to the car. They question us and I tell them we run cross-country for our high school, and we like to go out at night and run different places we aren't familiar with because it helps train our footing on unfamiliar terrain. They check our IDs, make sure there are no warrants for us, and let us go. They tell us not to park there anymore because it's a known local meetup spot and they patrol to make sure no one's banging in the park after dark. They let us go. Somehow, when they were shining their lights in the car, they missed all the other flags and stuff we'd snagged earlier in the night from other courses. We drive off, wait a few, and drive back to that tree, grab our clothes, and head home. We may or may not still have the flags. Cannot believe that worked. Story 124. I was 15 years old with 4 buddies in a small town. It was Halloween night and trick-or-treating had settled down. The town marshal was a Rambo wannabe, so it was always fun to mess with him. We were all dressed in black, so he knew we were up to no good. We spot him parked at the only gas station in town taking a break. I look at my buddies and take off running towards his car and do the best Dukes of Hazzard slide across his hood. We all scramble and run through yards and hide all around town. One guy did take a nasty clothesline injury though. Story 125. Several years ago, me and 4 other friends went to a local park on a really foggy night to watch a meteor shower. This was one of those sports parks with baseball diamonds, football, and soccer fields. We parked in the farthest back parking lot that was made of gravel instead of asphalt. One of my friends brought a police radio with him so we could listen in on the cops. One cop car entered the park and started patrolling. He was probably only 100 meters away from us and shined his spotlight right at us. We just stayed still and quiet and waited. Then we heard on the radio, "The park is clear," and we all breathed a sigh of relief and waited about 30 minutes before leaving. Either the fog kept the officer from seeing us, or they just didn't care. Story 126. I wasn't necessarily running from the cops, but me and a few buddies took a road trip to watch an NBA game in Minneapolis. We parked at a Subway restaurant in a dinky town, University area, and while we were eating, my car got towed. I called the company and went to the location. The gate was open for the impound lot and I saw my car just sitting there. They parked it in the garage though. I went into the garage and no one was there. I called out as I wanted to pay to get my car back. No one answered. So, since I still had the keys, I said, screw it. Went into my car, drove away as fast as I could. Still don't know if my car's in their system or what happens next, but that was 6 years ago, so I think I'm okay. Well, hey, hope he tried. He was fully willing to give them the money. Not his fault they weren't there. Story 127. I was 16 hanging out with 3 other friends. We were drinking beer and vodka and decided to go climb the roof of our high school and watch the sunrise. It was still pretty dark at this point, about 4:30 a.m., and while we were on the roof we see 2 cop cars pull up on either side of the building with the cherries on top, and the cops got out with flashlights. I guess they thought we were trying to break into the school. The 4 of us book it, get to a spot we can climb down, and get to the ground. It's in this U-shape part of the school, and as I hit the ground, I see one of the cops coming around the far corner. We were pretty screwed at this point, hiding in a corner, when I had an idea. In the opposite corner of the big U-shape, there was a big open metal dumpster, and I had one of those plastic 26-ounce plastic bottles of Smirnoff with about a quarter left in it. I Kobe'd this thing from a pretty good distance, and it lands with a thud in the dumpster. The cops immediately head for it, assuming we're hiding inside. We sneak up around the corner and book it into the forest behind the school. Story 128. First, let me set the scene. It's about 10 p.m. in a low-traffic country road, with freshly picked corn and bean fields on both sides with tall grass in the ditches and waterways. I also have a ghillie suit, so I decide to put on my ghillie suit and have the 2 other people with me hide in the tall grass with police scanner apps running and cameras at the ready. Once I could see headlights coming, I would hunch my back and walk on the opposite side of the road, like how you would expect Bigfoot to walk or something like that. About 6 cars go by and a couple of priceless reactions when we hear the police scanner come to life. A report of an unknown animal heading down road XYZ, and 2 county squad cars responded to come check on it, or check on us. At this point, we knew if we were to stay on the road, we would be caught for sure, so we decided to walk 200 to 300 yards into the cornfield and walk parallel with the road back home. About 10 minutes of walking the muddy cornfield go by, and the cops finally make it to the stretch of road where we had been, spotlights lighting up the surrounding ditches and fields. The other 2 found some tall grass to hide in, and I squat down in plain sight as the searchlight made its way to us. The light went right over me and continued, looking for the source of the call. The police scanner comes alive again. It's the squad cars that are looking for us, letting HQ know there are no signs of any animal and end their search. We made it back home with none the wiser. Story 129. This would be about 1978. I'm screwing around with my friend DS in a big field next to a school in the middle of our small town in Alberta, Canada. It's a late August, 1 in the morning. DS has his compound bow and a ton of old arrows, so we get some rags and some gasoline. Make fire arrows. We fire the fire arrows across the field in a 200-meter arc. They go all the way across the field and hit a dirt patch in front of the school parking lot. We do this for 10 to 15 minutes, and we're almost out of arrows. DS fires the last one, and we watch it arc all the way down and hit the ground about 10 feet from an RCMP officer. He was responding to a call of, fire arrows, I guess. The cherries come on and we see the dirt get stirred up from the dirt patch as he starts ripping across the field. We duck into a pedestrian pathway, no way for the car to get in, and we ran to the house 2 blocks away. We hid in my room and saw some police cars, but no one came knocking. The next Thursday, the local community weekly newspaper came out and the lead story was, "Cops attacked by fire arrows." Cool. I was 10, by the way. Story 130. Was 18. Driving towards a 3-way intersection at around midnight. Light turned yellow, looked around and saw nobody was around, so I gunned it trying to make it. I didn't. There was a cop up on a hill that saw me run the red light, so he turns on his party lights and starts coming for me. He had some ground to cover, so I turned down a back road and started hauling butt, making random turns. Saw another cop light up and start coming for me too. Made some more turns, and since I was only a couple blocks from home, I called a roommate, told him to open the back gate and get ready. I'm coming in hot. I haven't lost the cops yet. They're keeping up, but we're a couple blocks behind me. I turned onto our street, punched it, and pretty much fishtailed into the driveway and drove through the opened gate in the side yard and stopped the car while the roommate tossed a car cover over my ride. I jumped out the car and we ran to our smoker's outpost on the side of the house, sat down just in time to see the cops driving down the street with a spotlight. They lit us up with the light, we acted surprised and waved. They kept going. Story 131. So there was this teacher in my high school that everyone hated. Everyone. And this teacher had a kid in my class. Well, one weekend the teacher and his wife go on vacation and the kid throws this party at his dad's house. So he invites everyone. We're all just hanging out in the basement. The police get called and, in a brilliant example of word association, I yell, "Screw the police!" So now the cop walks down the stairs to a huge crowd of white kids yelling, "Screw the police," with the tone of a guy who's already been to jail. So then I run through the yard, hop the fence, and then wake up in bed the next day. Story 132. Was at a house party in an apartment. Fairly drunk when the cops walk in the door and yell, "Anyone who's here is in trouble." Go out to the balcony, second floor, jump off and take off running. Apartment complex was across the road from a golf course. Ended up running into the golf course and wandered around for hours. Woke up on someone's back porch to the owner, rightfully, very angry and confused, yelling at me from the inside. Wander back through the golf course and end up sleeping in the backseat of the car I came in. It was someone else's, but they left it unlocked. Story 133. My junior year of high school, the week before I graduated, I was told I was moving across the country again, even though I'd spent the last 8 years of my life there. I was upset, so I started acting all rebellious. So I took a real risk with this crazy chick in my forensics class, got absolutely hammered for the first time, but I decided to go tagging with another new friend of mine. He and I decided at 11:30 would be a good time to break into school grounds and tag a piece we were working on. But when we pulled up, a cop was waiting outside. So we pulled our masks on and flashed our flashlight at him. He flashed his lights at us, and boom, we dipped. This happened in southern Arizona, by the way. So imagine a barren desert with human-height brush everywhere. We hopped a barbed wire fence and laid down flat, while also shoving spray paint cans in our packs. We made sure not to bring wallets or wear t-shirts that could be associated to us. Hey, we thought this out. But we had planned to throw them and be able to run easier. We were next to the highway, so we waited, and a few seconds later, he drove by with his lights on. We wait a split second, hopped the barbed wire fence and legged it across the highway, hopped another fence, and then just kept running till we recognized something to find our way home. Scariest moment of my life so far. Somehow, though, my friend got recognized by the cop because he forgot his mask, and it was the same weekend seniors did their senior prank and tagged the school. Dumb stuff like 420 Blaze on all the school buses and dented in bus doors. Then he dropped my name and we almost both got charged. But with other crap to worry about, with underage drinking and driving with graduation weekend, they inevitably dropped it. I didn't even end up moving senior year. I got to graduate with my friends senior year. It was great. Story 134. My friend and I were 20. We were trying to find some weed for the evening. All of our regulars were NA. We got a number from a friend who said, "This dude is sketchy. Make sure you make it quick." Sure as crap, we pulled up. I told my friend I'd keep the car running, and he jumped out, sauntered inside. Maybe 30 seconds later, he came out and started running to the car. At the same time, a cop was driving by me. I made eye contact with the cop and then looked at my friend who did one of those hop skip jumps like, should I still be running? The cop sped up and did a U-turn very fast. As my friend got in the car, Blink-182 What's My Age was playing on the radio and we sped off. I saw berries and cherries go up just as I rounded a corner. That was the last time I saw that cop/that dealer. I sped 80 miles per hour through countless suburbs, twisting and taking alleys. I knew I did a bad thing driving away from the cops, but goddamn, if I wasn't a hero that night smoking with my chums. Turns out many cops were on their way. The dude got busted for selling H. Story 135. I was driving to my friend's house with one passenger too many in my car. I was showing off, and instead of driving all the way down to turn around for my friend's street, I decided to drive the wrong way down the other side of the divided street, kind of towards another oncoming car, but I turned before they passed. My friends say it was a cop and I race down the street, park, and we all pile out and into my friend's house as fast as we could. We say, if anyone asks, we've been here for 2 hours. Honestly, I have no proof it was a cop, but they swear to me it was. Story 136. Not really full-on running, really just got lucky and the cop got distracted. Had just bought my 16 Mustang GT. Been a long time since I drove a manual, so I had been just driving and cruising around after work, getting used to going through the gears again. I'm screwing around with it and I pulled down a 55-mile-per-hour street to head towards the gas station near my work I always get gas at. It was time to top up again. I decided to get frisky, punch it at a light and get on it a little bit. Car is new to me, a lot faster than the car I traded in. I'm not doing 55, I'm doing like 70. Whoops. I also see a car just sitting on the side of the road. Is it a cop? Ah, crap, it's probably a cop. I downshift and let the engine slow me. As I pass him, I'm probably doing 60 now. Well, 5 miles over the limit ain't crap, right? I'm sure he heard the pitch of my engine and exhaust and knew I was downshifting anyway. I probably wasn't being as sneaky as I hoped by not lighting my brake lights up like a Christmas tree. Sure enough, headlights turn on and I see him pulling out behind me. Also, my gas station is right here, so I pull in. There's another cop here. His lights are lit up and he has a truck pulled over. The truck decided to apparently pull in and stop at one of the pumps to receive his ticket. In an awkward move, I say screw it. I pull in at the pump directly next to this truck and proceed to gas up. The cop that pulled out on the road behind me parks across the street. There's a Chevron gas station right across the street from the Maverick I got gas at. The Chevron is closed and dark as hell at this time of night. Maybe the pumps are still open, I don't know. But the place is in total darkness, so maybe not. Cop sits there and is just watching me and I'm going, heck. He's gonna wait me out till I'm done and then pull me over. As I'm finishing pumping, a third cop shows up. He goes across the street and parks next to the cop staking me out. They roll down windows and are talking, and I just straight up left. Lots of cops out that night and a lot of vehicles pulled over. They were definitely on the prowl that night. Maybe this guy just saw the paper plates still on my car and decided, screw it, give the kid a break. He got ample enough warning to slow it down tonight. Story 137. When I was young, there was this massive old wooden fence that went around this public park. My friends and I used to go out and get drunk and thought it was a good idea to kick it down. One day we were drinking in the daytime and started doing this again. I was kicking it just as we saw the police come around the corner. And that's when my jeans got stuck on a nail. So as I'm desperately trying to get loose, the cops start getting out of the car. I manage to get loose and start running on the outside of the fence and avoid being grabbed by inches. I sprint down and into the park where there was this big fat guy walking. The cop shouts at him to grab me and I fake a right and go left. This is enough for him to fall on the wet grass and I sprint all the way out. They stopped chasing and I didn't come out of my house for a week. On the positive side to this stupid pastime, the town eventually replaced the whole fence with this new and stylish metal fence that is still up to this day. OP. Encouraging city improvements, one act of delinquents at a time. Story 138. I have 3. 2.5 were successful. First one. Driving home from work as a teenager. First time locking up and taking a big envelope of cash to the bank. Took a curve onto the main road in town well above the speed limit. Oncoming police officer from another town, we didn't have police, passes in the other direction. Flips on his lights. Based on his distance away and knowing the neighborhood, I plotted my escape plan. Took my first turn. Random old people driving slow delayed me long enough for the police car to get to that street before my turn. I changed plans, went a different way. He pulled me over. Told him I was nervous having so much money on me. Explained I was taking it from work to the bank. And my made-up story for why I turned off the road that had the bank. He bought it and let me go my merry way. Time number 2. Still a teenager, slightly older, but still stupid. Recently moved to the city. Driving down one of the main roads. Cavalier pulls up next to us with 2 attractive girls. I roll down my passenger window and my passenger strikes up a conversation. Light goes green, we drive and repeat at the next light. Going again, they made a turn down another major route. I take the next turn, fly down that road, and turn back towards the route they went down. We see them go by, but our light is red and stays red and stays red and stays red. So I make an illegal left turn through a red light onto the busiest street downtown. Then I punch the gas to catch the girls. Passing a side street 40% above the limit and still accelerating, notice a police car on the street. Watching the mirror, he begins pulling out. No lights yet. We took an unsignaled right onto another route, and another immediate right into an alley, which was very icy because I had to do this crap in winter. We're sliding sideways as we try to crawl through this alley. Watching the rear view, see the police car go down the route we just turned off. So we turn out of the alley and head away from that police officer. In my red truck in a sea of black and white cars. We pass a police officer going the other direction on that street, watch the mirror, and he pulls a U-ey. Still no lights. So I randomly go down more side streets. On one of these side streets, we see another police vehicle, who also happens to start turning around after passing us. That was our last sighting. None of the vehicles ever had their lights on. It could have been a coincidence, but it was stressful as hell. Time number 3. Still a dumb teenager. Going home from work again, rolling, or not really slowing down much, through a stop sign. Realize there's an unmarked police vehicle going the other way. Circa 2003, our unmarked cars could be spotted from blocks away quite easily. Watch the mirror and he starts turning around. So I make some random turns, park at a house, and lie across the seat of the truck. After 10 to 15 minutes, I proceeded on my way. So I can't really confirm he was after me, but I suspected he was enough to bolt. So 3 times in 18 months. 0 times in 15 years. Story 139. One New Year's Eve when I was a rebellious 16-year-old, a friend had bought a firework. We decided we wanted to light it in a golf course which was in the middle of a huge suburb and then leg it after watching them go off for a bit. Was absolutely sick and loud. After a few seconds, we started to run to a nearby street and a cop car was coming towards us already, so they must have been patrolling the area. Was a big oh crap moment for me and my friends. We quickly turned and ran in the other direction. Was so drunk at that point I don't remember how long I ran for, but my friends and I all split up. I hid in a bush somewhere and luckily the 2 officers followed my friends instead of me, and nobody was caught. Story 140. Okay, bit of backstory here. I was the most boring, studious, law-abiding stereotype of an Asian guy who's focused on his studies, but wasn't well off, and ended up going to community college in a not-so-great area. I was a bit out of my element, and this is how it almost bit me in the butt. My first year of college, I was walking downtown to meet up with some of my friends after class. I didn't have a car back then, and the bus schedule was so bad that it was faster to walk. So this car suddenly pulled up behind me, braking way too abruptly, and it drew my attention immediately. The part of town I was walking through was a bit sketchy, and my first thought was I was going to be a victim of a drive-by. I didn't know it was the cops who had pulled up behind me. But anyone pulling up like that after dark in that part of the city is probably not doing it to ask for directions. So I immediately legged it down a side street, turning it down to a light jog when the vehicle didn't follow. Then a cop turns the corner absolutely hauling and screaming at me to stop. I remember thinking for a second that it was unmistakably a cop. I didn't do anything. I should probably just hold up. But I'd already started running from him and changed my mind fast. He looked and sounded like he wanted to kick my butt. After that brief moment of hesitation, I was gone again. He sounded like he got pretty close for a few moments. I didn't turn to check, but after a few hundred meters or so, I could tell he was falling behind. Then after a few blocks, I finally turned to check behind me. He was still chasing, but had fallen way, way behind. When I ran across a pretty busy street, he didn't seem to follow me. That's when I lost him. After that, I made my way to the meetup spot wondering what they thought I did. Story 141. Was redecorating a flat for renting 50 miles away from home. I got into the habit of driving back and forth between 2 to 5 a.m. because the roads are empty. Bang the cruise control up to 100 and pull it one back to 99 whilst overtaking a Volvo, which instantly lit up like a blue Christmas tree. Slow down and the guy draws beside, gesturing for me to slow down. He was alone and must not have had any cameras, so couldn't do anything. Result, he then sets off at 90, so I thought sod it, and tailgated him at a sensible distance for the next 40 miles. No ticket and a popo escort home. Story 142. A friend of mine had some legal troubles that led to warrants. He basically started driving around for years without a license and with multiple warrants. This is a bad combination because if you get pulled over for anything, you're going to jail. He had bad luck and would get pulled over often. We were going home one night and were about a 2-minute drive from his house when we notice a cop parked on a side street. Sure enough, the cop pulls out to follow. My friend speeds up a little and makes a turn. Cop speeds up a little and makes the turn to follow. My friend said, screw it. Started going very fast. He turned off the lights on his car about a block away from his house and pulled in the driveway and into the back so the car couldn't be seen from the street. Half a minute later, the cop creeps by very slowly. He knows we pulled into one of these driveways but doesn't know which. It was quite a thrill and I was just a passenger. It helped that this particular suburb has streets with lots of curves and turns and not your basic grid layout that many cities have. Maybe I'm just straight-edged, but I don't think I would get in a car with someone who has multiple warrants out and no license. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Story 143. In 1993, I was one night from leaving my hometown and moving to Arizona. My friend John and I decided I needed one last party and hit a few bars. After, we went to our favorite Denny's because that's what you do. I should preface this now that my friend John is like 6'4" and built like a tank, with a bright green mohawk. We're sitting at Denny's enjoying some food and bullcrapping, and all of a sudden, John starts laughing. I asked, what's so funny? He says these 2 guys sitting across the aisle from us are talking crap about his hair. John all of a sudden gets up and starts wailing on the guy directly across from him, beating the crap out of the guy. I get up and try to grab John off the guy when the guy's buddy punches me in the face. I stop and yell at the guy, I'm stopping my friend from murdering your friend. I finally get John off the guy and we sit back down. The guy John hit is bloody, so he and his friend head to the bathroom. I tell John it's probably a good time to leave, to which he agrees. As we are walking out, I see 4 cop cars screech into the parking lot, lights and sirens screaming. As John and I are hitting the door, John holds the door open. A half-dozen cops run into the Denny's. John and I look at the cops and say, the guys you want are in the bathroom. And we leave. I moved to Arizona the next day, and last I checked with John, he's never been back to that Denny's. A fist fight in the Denny's, huh? I've heard of Panic at the Disco, but that's ridiculous. Story 144. My brother, who by all accounts made poor choices when he was 15, got into a legendary chase with lasting implications. It was New Year's around 2 a.m., and my brother was walking home from a party on the opposite end of town. He, like most kids that age, was wearing a backpack, and I guess that's what triggered the cops to pull him over. Or at least attempt to. So the cops turn on cherries and drive towards my brother, who's walking through an industrial area. Brother panicked and decided running was better than facing my parents after being busted. So he hoofs it to the back of the building where he knows there's an opening in the fence, while the cop speeds up to cut him off. The police officer must have misjudged the amount of ice on the ground, and instead of turning towards the escaping kid, he hits the building dead on with his cruiser and my brother escapes. The escape didn't last long, as backup arrived quick and managed to arrest him, handcuffed him, drove him back home to have a chat with my father. The cop has decided to charge my brother with both reckless endangerment and public intoxication. My father loses his crap on the police officer, saying the cruiser could have just as likely hit my brother, and why are they chasing children in their car in the first place? So cop is steaming mad and takes it upon himself to call our house and informed my mother that the court date had been moved back 2 weeks. My father suspected something was off and showed up for court with my brother on the original day, and yes, the trial was indeed that day. What a debacle. So lying about a court date to get someone in trouble, surely that's illegal, right? Surely that cop should face some sort of reprimand, but probably won't. Story 146. Not really a running from the cops, but if we were caught, it would have been bad. My friends and I left a bonfire that was crashed by the kids' parents coming home, so cops were closing in. All of us were underage and trashed, and took the only road out, the highway. We saw headlights follow us into town, and get closer when one of our friends stuck her head out the window and screamed drunkenly. Everyone was nervous, but I knew an alleyway we could run down. So we started taking ridiculous turns. Cops still followed. We slipped down a side street, offshoot into the alley, and park in my dad's driveway. We all run out of the car and hide behind his garage. Cop comes down the street in front of the alley, slows down when he passes by the vehicle, and keeps going. I still don't know how we got out of that one. Then again, that town's cops pulled my friend and I over one night. We were stoned stupid, and the cop bought my story about crying over a breakup. OP, why are these two stories both about you being intoxicated while driving? Or at least someone was in the first story, not necessarily you. Either way, I don't think I like you very much. You could have just straight up ended someone on the road because of this. Don't be stupid. Story 147. Me and my friend were like 20-ish, and there was this abandoned barn you could see from the highway. Well, we lived pretty close to it and decided to head out at night and explore it to see if there was anything cool. It was winter and we were a little concerned there may be homeless people getting shelter there, so we brought baseball bats just in case we were attacked. We also decided we should bring as many beers as we can carry. We start to walk there from a friend's house who lives walking distance from the barn. The problem is, the barn is hidden by some trees and you have to walk through a field from a local street. But it was like 11 p.m. with minimal traffic. Just our luck, a cop flashes his lights as we're about a quarter way through the field. Now, we're underage with 10 beers and baseball bats in the middle of the night, and a cop catches up. My friend and I are like, crap, what do we do? I tell him we drop the bats and maybe he won't see them. A second patrol car pulls up, and as the first cop is asking what we're doing, the second cop sees the bats and asks why we dropped them. We said we didn't want to approach an officer with a weapon, and he said, "Good answer." He then took my wallet to check my ID, saw a photo of my at-the-time girlfriend, and said, "She's smoking." At this point, we were pretty sure we weren't going to get in trouble, so we asked him, if we ran, do you think we could have gotten away? He said we could have gotten away from him, but not his dog. And he gestured to his car, which had the words, Canine Unit. End of the story. He took down our info, made us dump the beer out, and said if there were any reports of vandalism in the area, he would have to follow up with us. He gave us the bats and told us to go home. Story 148. When I was about 17, my friends took me to climb buildings for the first time, and decided to pick a multi-story construction site. We made it to the top, but one of us bailed halfway up because he heard an alarm. After getting back down, we sat on a skate park opposite the site. After a few minutes, a police car drove past and we all made jokes about them coming after us. Before we knew it, the car came back around, pulled up in front of us. We all began walking away across the park as the officers got out and pointed flashlights towards us. Suddenly, one of us started running and we all followed suit. We hear shouting behind us but only see the beams of flashlights. We came into a housing area where we jumped over a couple of fences and almost ran into another police car driving past a corner. Eventually, we split up and met up later for drinks. One of the most exhilarating nights of my life. And there you have it. Lots of stories of people running from the law. And a lot of stories where people were like, probably shouldn't have done that. And also some stories where I was like, you probably shouldn't have done that. I don't mean to be preachy or virtue signaling or anything like that, but I feel like it's common sense to not drink and drive, right? That seems like a super avoidable thing. I thought that was just generally accepted by now. Anyway, that's all the stories we got for today. Have you ever run from the cops for any reason? If you have, throw it in the comments. I'm sure people would like to read it. For now, though, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night, and I will see you in the next one.